the passenger at mile 247. Hello, Senor Williams, and good evening to the entire Carreteras de la Oscuridad community. My name is Ramiro Espinoza. I've been driving 18-wheelers for going on 22 years, mostly between Monterrey and Mexico City on Federal Highway 57. I never thought I'd be the kind of man to write one of these letters. My wife used to listen to this channel while she ironed clothes, and I'd walk through the kitchen and shake my head at her. Fairy tales, I used to say. I don't say that anymore. Pull up close and turn off the light. What I'm about to tell you happened 14 months ago, and there isn't a night on the road that I don't think about it. I was going through a rough patch. My daughter Valeria had just been diagnosed with a kidney condition that needed surgery, and the bills were stacking up faster than I could earn. My dispatcher, a man named Queller, knew I was desperate, so he started loading me up with back-to-back runs, cutting my rest breaks to the legal minimum and sometimes a little past that. I wasn't sleeping more than 4 hours between shifts. My eyes had that gritty sandpaper feeling all the time. The inside of my cab smelled like stale coffee, fast food wrappers, and the cheap pine air freshener I hung from the mirror to keep myself alert. It hadn't worked in weeks. That night I left Saltillo at 11:30 with a full load of industrial equipment headed for Querétaro. The highway was empty. Mid-November, cold enough that my breath fogged the windshield when the heater cycled down. The radio was tuned to a ranchera station out of San Luis Potosi that kept fading in and out through the mountain passes. I had my thermos of black coffee wedged between the seat and the door. My back hurt. My eyes hurt. Everything hurt. Around the 247th kilometer marker, I noticed something on the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it was a bag of garbage. We get a lot of that on 57. People toss things from cars. But as my headlights swept over it, I saw it was a man. He was standing completely still, facing the highway with one arm extended, hitchhiking, at 12:30 in the morning on a stretch of road with nothing for 40 kilometers in either direction. I should have kept going. Every experienced trailero knows you don't stop for hitchhikers on Federal 57 at night. I know men who've been robbed that way, or worse. But I was tired, I was lonely, and some part of me that I can't fully explain felt sorry for him. I pulled over about 50 meters ahead and waited. He walked to the passenger door slowly, deliberately, like a man who wasn't in any hurry despite having flagged me down. I rolled down the window. He was maybe 50 years old, thin, wearing a dark jacket and work pants with dried mud on the knees. He had a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. His face was ordinary. That's the detail that unsettles me most now. There was nothing remarkable about him. He could have been anyone's uncle. "Going south?" he asked. "As far as San Luis," I said. "After that you're on your own." He nodded and climbed in. He smelled like earth and something underneath the earth. Something deep and cold, like water from a well that hadn't been opened in years. I figured he'd been working in the fields. It wasn't strange. I merged back onto the highway. He didn't speak for the first 20 minutes, and neither did I. I've picked up enough people over the years to know when someone doesn't want to talk, and he had that quality about him. A settled, heavy silence, like he was somewhere else inside his head. I respected it. The ranchera station faded out entirely around kilometer 260, and all I got was static, so I turned it off. Then he spoke. "You have a sick child," he said. I gripped the wheel tighter. I hadn't told him anything. I hadn't said a word beyond the destination. "My daughter," I said carefully. "How did you know that?" He didn't answer directly. He was looking out the passenger window at the darkness sliding past. "They always carry it with them," he said. "The father's, right here." He touched the center of his chest with 2 fingers, not pointed at me, just touching himself, as if describing something he'd observed in others. I told myself he was making conversation. Maybe I looked tired. Maybe the worry showed on my face the way my wife always said it did. I kept driving. What happened next is difficult to explain in a way that doesn't sound like the ravings of a sleep-deprived man. And believe me, I've considered that explanation. Around kilometer 280, we passed a green road sign, and in the reflection of my headlights, I glanced at the passenger side mirror out of habit. I do it constantly. Years of checking blind spots. In the mirror, I saw the road behind me, the white dashes of the lane, the darkness. I did not see my passenger. Not his shoulder, not the side of his head, not the canvas bag, nothing. The seat beside me in that mirror was empty. I turned to look directly at him. He was there. sitting exactly as before, hands folded on the bag in his lap, eyes forward. I told myself the mirror angle was off. I adjusted it with the little switch on the door. When I looked again, the mirror showed the seat beside me, and it was empty. My mouth went completely dry. I could feel my heartbeat in my temples. I didn't say anything. I stared at the road and I drove and I breathed, and I told myself there was a rational explanation for everything. Around kilometer 310, he spoke again. "The girl will recover," he said. Just that. Flat and certain, the way you tell someone what the weather would be like tomorrow. I didn't respond. I couldn't. He said nothing more. At the junction for the road to Matehuala, he said, "Here," and I pulled over without thinking, operating on automatic pilot. He opened the door, climbed down, closed it behind him with a soft click, and walked away from the cab toward the darkness beside the road. I watched him in my actual mirror, my left side mirror, and I saw him walk about 10 steps and then simply not be there anymore. No trees, no gully, no structure. The shoulder of the road was flat and open for 200 meters and there was nothing to walk behind. I sat there with the engine idling for what might have been 10 minutes. Valeria's surgery was 6 weeks later. The procedure went perfectly. Her doctor, a young woman from Guadalajara who'd barely looked old enough to be out of medical school, told us afterward that she'd been worried about a complication they'd found in the pre-op scans, something that could have been serious. When they opened her up, the complication wasn't there. She used the word resolved and shrugged the way doctors do when they can't explain something. I still drive Highway 57 and I still pass kilometer 247 every few weeks. I don't stop for anyone anymore, but sometimes, when I check the passenger mirror out of habit, I hold my breath for just a moment before I look. If you drive that road at night and you're desperate enough to be stopping for strangers, maybe think twice. And if someone already seems to know what's breaking your heart before you've said a word, don't look in the mirror, just drive. And now, from the solitude of the highway, we move to a different kind of confinement. The following story was shared by a correctional officer who works in one of Mexico's oldest federal penitentiaries. The night shift at Block D. Good evening, Senor Williams. My name is Gerardo Fuentes, and I'm a correctional officer. 14 years at the Centro Federal de Readaptación Social No. 1, known to most of Mexico as El Altiplano. I'm writing this because 3 months ago something happened during my overnight shift in Block D that I've discussed with no one except my priest, and even he looked at me differently afterward. I was listening to Carreteras de la Oscuridad on my drive home after the incident, and I heard another guard from a different facility describe something similar in the administrative wing. That was what pushed me to write. Turn off whatever noise is around you. This isn't a story for distracted ears. Block D houses inmates in protective custody. Not your high-profile names, but people who've been moved out of general population for their own safety. Informants, former officers, men who made enemies they can't avoid inside. It's quieter than the other blocks. The men in D tend to keep to themselves. There's less shouting, fewer fights. What it has instead is a particular quality of silence that presses on you during the 2 to 6 a.m. stretch in a way that other blocks don't. I've worked every wing in that institution, and I can tell you, the silence in Block D isn't the same as silence anywhere else. It has weight. My situation at home was difficult. My wife and I had been separated for 8 months, and she had taken our 2 boys to her mother's house in Aguascalientes. I was living alone in a 1-bedroom near the prison that smelled like mildew and the previous tenants cooking. The only money I was saving by not having my family around was being swallowed by the divorce lawyer I could barely afford. I was depressed. I'll use that word plainly because the prison's counselor had used it and written it in a file. And I'd sat across from her with my arms folded, not believing it applied to me. It applied to me. That night, a Tuesday in September, cold enough that I wore a second layer under my uniform. My partner Dominguez called in sick, so I was running Block D solo from 2 a.m. until 6. Administration does this more than they should. Budget issues. I did my first round at 2:15, checking cell doors, counting, noting anything unusual in the log. Nothing. Inmates sleeping, most of them. The fluorescent light at the far end of the corridor had been flickering for 3 days. Maintenance had been promising to fix it. They hadn't. I settled into the guard station at the midpoint of the block. The station is a desk behind a reinforced window, with a monitor showing feeds from the 4 cameras in the corridor. I had a thermos of coffee. Terrible, industrial, the kind that tastes like it was made from brown powder and regret. I drank it anyway. At 3:40, I noticed something on the monitor. Camera 2 covers the north end of the corridor, cells 12 through 20. In the corner of the frame, near the wall beside cell 16, there was a shape, a darkness within the darkness. It was distinct enough that I sat up straight and leaned toward the screen. It had the rough outline of a person, but low to the ground, like someone crouching or sitting against the wall. No inmate should be out of a cell at 3:40 a.m. The doors were magnetically locked. I checked the panel. All cells secure. I checked the other 3 cameras. Nothing. I picked up the radio and called it in as a possible camera malfunction. The officer on duty at the central console told me the feed looked fine on his end and asked me to do a visual check. I took my flashlight and my radio and walked to the north end of the block. The flickering light was doing its thing, casting the corridor in alternating brightness and shadow. The smell was the usual one. Industrial cleaner over something biological, old concrete, the particular stuffiness of recycled prison air. I walked slowly, checking both sides. All cell doors closed. I reached the wall beside cell 16 and played the flashlight over the corner where the shape had appeared on the monitor. Nothing. Clean wall. A small pile of dust in the corner that the cleaning crew had missed. Nothing else. I went back to the station. On the monitor, the shape was gone. I noted it in the log. Possible shadow artifact, camera 2, 0340, visual check negative, and poured more coffee. I was tired. I'd been on since 6 the previous evening. I told myself I'd imagined it, or the camera had glitched, or a guard from a different block had passed through somehow, which was impossible given the door protocols, but which my tired brain preferred to believe. At 4:15 I heard singing. Not loud, not the kind of thing you'd notice if there were any other sound in the world. But Block D at 4:15 a.m. is as close to absolute silence as any place I've ever been, and the singing carried clearly. It was a single low voice, no words I could make out, just a melody. Old. The kind of melody that sounds like it comes from somewhere before recorded music, if that makes sense. I stood up. I turned off the desk lamp so I could listen without distraction. The singing was coming from the north end of the block. I walked the corridor again. I stopped at the midpoint and listened. The singing was clearer now. It was coming from the wall. Not from cell 16, but from the wall itself. The space between cells 15 and 17 where there was nothing but poured concrete 18 inches thick. I stood there for a long time, long enough that my hand went cold holding the flashlight, even though the prison was adequately heated. The singing didn't change in pitch or rhythm. It didn't get louder or softer. It just continued, patient and unhurried, as if it had been going on for a very long time and didn't need anything from me. I walked back to the station. I sat down. I wrote everything in the log. I didn't go back to the north end of the block before my shift ended. The next day I asked an older officer, a man who'd worked El Altiplano for 26 years, if he'd ever had anything strange happen in Block D. He didn't look at me funny, he didn't laugh, he just said, "Which cell?" "The wall between 15 and 17, I said. He nodded slowly and went back to his paperwork. After a moment he said, "Cell 16 used to be a different space. Before the renovation in the 90s, there was a disciplinary area there, before my time." He said nothing more. I transferred to Block B 4 months later. I sleep better now. Marginally. I don't work solo overnight anymore. I've asked, and they've respected it. If you work nights in a place where people are contained against their will, pay attention to the silences. Some of them are just silence. Some of them are not. Learn the difference before the difference introduces itself to you. We leave the prison walls now and step out into the pre-dawn streets, where another kind of night worker moves through the city unseen. What the garbage knows. Buenas noches, Señor Williams, and to everyone listening in the dark. My name is Crescencio Villanueva. I work for the Municipal Sanitation Department in Torreon, Coahuila. Have done so for 9 years, part of a crew that covers the Colonia Centro route, starting at 4 in the morning and finishing, if everything goes right, around 11. I debated writing this for 2 weeks. What I'm about to share sounds impossible, and I'm not a man who deals in the impossible. I deal in garbage. I know what's real, but I also know what I saw, and I know what happened to me after, and I can't keep it sealed up any longer. Settle in. This won't take long, but it'll stay with you. Our crew is 3 men. Me, a young guy named Tobias, and the driver, old Melkor, who hasn't spoken more than 4 sentences per shift in the 9 years I've known him. We drive a compactor truck through the narrow streets before anyone else is awake, dragging bins, lifting bags, watching the city at its most honest. People throw away everything. You'd be amazed what you learn about human beings from their trash. Which neighborhoods have the money, which ones are struggling, which houses have a problem they don't talk about. It's all in the garbage. My problem at the time was my mother. She was 81 and living alone in a house in the Colonia del Maestro, about 20 minutes from my apartment. She had early-stage dementia. Not the aggressive kind yet, but the creeping kind that calls you at 3 a.m. asking where your father is, even though your father has been dead for 15 years. I was the only one who dealt with it. My brothers both live in the States. I dealt with the calls, the weekly grocery runs, the arguments with her about whether she'd taken her medication. I was exhausted in a specific way that sleep doesn't fix. The kind that lives in the chest, not the body. It was a Thursday in June. The heat in Torreon in June is not polite heat. It's aggressive. Even at 4 in the morning it was already 28 degrees and the smell of the garbage route, which on any other day I've made peace with, was especially pronounced. Rotting produce, sour milk, the particular sweetness of something that has been wet and then dried and then wet again. I wear a bandana over my nose. It doesn't do much. We were working the stretch of Calle Lerdo near the old market building, the one that's been half demolished and half standing for years in that way that Torreon building projects have. It was around 4:40 a.m. Tobias was on the opposite side of the street. Melkor was in the cab. I was dragging bins from the mouth of an alley toward the truck. The alley went about 30 meters back and terminated at a wall. There was a single yellow light on a motion sensor somewhere in the middle, the kind that triggers when anything moves. It was on when I entered and it clicked off by the time I reached the bins, which means whatever had triggered it was no longer moving. I had my headlamp on. I grabbed the first bin and started dragging. Then I heard something, small sound, sandal on pavement. From the back of the alley, from the area near the wall. I turned the headlamp toward the back. There was a child standing at the wall. A girl. 8 or 9 years old, I'd say. She was wearing a white dress. Not a nightgown, but something like a dress you'd see on a girl going to church. She was bare feet, no shoes. At 4:40 in the morning in an alley off Calle Lerdo. I thought, lost or wandered from home or something has happened to her. I said, "Nina, are you all right? Where's your family?" She didn't answer. She was looking at me. Her face was very still. I took 2 steps toward her, and the motion sensor light came back on, triggered by my movement. And in that sudden yellow light I could see her clearly. She was looking directly at me with an expression that was not frightened or confused. It was patient. The same patient quality as someone who has been waiting a long time for something they know is coming. "Are you hurt?" I said. She raised one hand and pointed, not at me, past me, toward the mouth of the alley. I turned to look. The street was empty. Tobias was not visible. He'd moved further up the block. The truck was idling 50 meters away. Nothing. When I turned back to the girl, the alley was empty. The light was on. The wall was there and there was no child. I walked the full length of the alley. I checked the corners, the doorways, a section where the wall had a gap barely wide enough for a child. Nothing. I went out to the street. I asked Tobias if he'd seen a girl. He said no, he hadn't seen anyone. I checked with Melkor. He shrugged his 4-sentence shrug. I finished the route. That evening, my sister-in-law, my older brother's wife, who had driven down from El Paso to visit my mother without telling me, called me to say that she'd arrived at my mother's house and found her on the floor in the kitchen. She'd fallen in the early morning, probably around 4 or 5 a.m. based on the condition she was in. She was badly hurt but alive. The ambulance came in time. The doctors said that another hour would have been a very different outcome. I don't know what the girl in the alley was. I don't know if she was connected to what happened to my mother, or if my exhausted mind has drawn a connection that doesn't exist. What I know is that she pointed out of that alley toward the direction of my mother's neighborhood, and I didn't understand the message. If you're walking the streets in the early morning and you see something that shouldn't be there, pay attention to where it's pointing. That's all I can tell you. From the streets we turn now to the stillness of a roadside motel where another story waits behind a thin wooden door. Room 11 at the Siesta del Camino. Hello, Senor Williams. I want to start by saying I never thought I'd be writing to this kind of channel. I'm a 43-year-old woman from Culiacan, Sinaloa. My name is Fernanda. I work in hotel administration. I've been a front desk manager at a small motor inn called the Siesta del Camino on the outskirts of the city for 6 years. I'm writing this because what happened in November is something I need to release to someone. And writing it down and sending it to a place where people understand that the world is stranger than it looks feels like the right way to do that. Go somewhere quiet. What I'm describing isn't the kind of story that sounds right with the television on. The Siesta del Camino has 14 rooms arranged in a horseshoe around a parking lot. It's not a nice motel. The rooms smell like the disinfectant we use to clean them, which barely covers the smell of the rooms themselves. Old carpet, decades of cigarettes absorbed into the walls, the particular mustiness of window air conditioners that don't drain properly. The clientele is what you'd expect from a 60 peso a night property on a highway outside Culiacan. Long-haul truckers, workers from the agricultural operations further south, and occasionally people who need a room for reasons they don't explain and I don't ask about. After 6 years, I've learned not to ask. November was hard for me personally. I'd ended a relationship in October. A long one with a man who was not good for me but who I'd organized my life around for 4 years. The ending was my decision, but it didn't make the nights easier. I was sleeping badly. I'd developed a habit of reading until 1 or 2 in the morning on my phone, and then staring at the ceiling until my alarm went off at 6. The loneliness of night shifts, which I'd always found manageable, had taken on a different texture. The quiet felt accusatory. On the night in question, a Wednesday the second week of November, I was working the desk from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. We had 7 rooms occupied. The remaining 7 were empty, cleaned and ready. Room 11, at the far end of the north wing, had been cleaned that afternoon by our housekeeper, Doña Consuelo, and marked available in the system. It was a room I'd always found slightly uncomfortable without being able to say why. The door sticks, the light over the sink has always flickered, the window faces a vacant lot, and the view at night is simply darkness. At 1:15 a.m. I noticed on the room status monitor that room 11 was showing an active keycard. This happens sometimes. System glitches, cards that weren't properly deactivated after a previous guest. I called the room. No answer. I noted it in the log and figured I'd check in the morning. At 1:40, the camera covering the north wing corridor showed movement outside room 11. I watched the monitor. The movement was a shadow. Inconsistent, the way shadows from passing vehicles sometimes slide along corridor walls when cars turn in the parking lot, but we had no cars in the north wing that night. I watched the shadow stay there for perhaps 30 seconds and then disappear. At 2:10, a man checked in. Room 8, south wing, paid cash, name in the register that I didn't look at too closely, standard. He went to his room. I went back to my book. At 2:50, the phone at the front desk rang. I answered. The call was internal. From room 11, I said our standard greeting. Silence on the line, not dead silence. There was something in it, a faint resonance, like the connection was open in a large space rather than a small motel room. I said, "Hello, is someone there?" The call disconnected. I stood there with the receiver in my hand for a moment. I probably should have left it. I probably should have logged it as a system malfunction and kept reading my book. But the night was slow, and the loneliness had made me restless. And some mixture of professional obligation and stubborn curiosity made me take the key from the box. A physical backup key, not a card. And walk to room 11. The corridor was cold, colder than it should have been. The north wing has its own heating unit, and I'd set it to low that morning. But the cold I'm describing was not underheated air, it was specific, localized. It started about 3 doors before room 11 and intensified as I walked. My breath made small clouds. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I unlocked it and pushed it open. The room was empty, correctly empty. Bed made, surfaces bare, everything as Doña Consuelo had left it. The flickering light over the sink was doing its thing. The smell was disinfectant and old carpet. The window facing the vacant lot was dark. I was about to leave when I noticed the bathroom door. It was closed. I always leave bathroom doors open after cleaning. It's a habit, better ventilation, and I knew Doña Consuelo did the same. It was Doña Consuelo's rule, actually. She taught it to me. Always leave the bathroom open, she told me. If someone finds it closed, there was someone in that room. I stood in front of the closed bathroom door for a long time. Long enough that the flickering light over the sink cycled through several of its flickering sequences. I put my hand on the bathroom door handle. Cold. Much colder than the room air, which was already cold. I didn't open it. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't open it. I backed away, walked out, locked the room, walked back to the front desk and sat down. I marked room 11 as out of service in the system. I did not call anyone. I did not go back. In the morning, I asked Doña Consuelo if she'd left the bathroom door closed in room 11. She looked at me. I never closed the bathroom door, she said. You know I never close the bathroom door. Room 11 has been out of service for 3 months. I've told my manager it's a maintenance issue with the sink light. He's accepted this. I don't know if I'll ever put it back in service. I can tell you this, whatever was in that room dialed my number at 2:50 in the morning in a motel where I was the only person supposed to be in that wing, and it had nothing to say. That's the part that stays with me. Not the cold, not the shadow, not the closed door. The call it made to the front desk. The choosing to reach out and then having nothing to communicate. Be careful with the rooms at the end of the hall. In this business we see a lot. Some of it we don't put in the log. We leave the stillness of the motel now and board a bus heading north where our next story unfolds between stops. The woman who boarded at Tepic. Good night, Senor Williams, and hello to the Carreteras de la Oscuridad family. My name is Hector Balbuena. I'm 56 years old and I've been driving intercity buses for Transportes del Pacífico Norte for 18 years. My regular route is the Mazatlan to Guadalajara line, which means I pass through Tepic, capital of Nayarit. Twice on most runs. I've covered this route hundreds of times. I know every curve of that highway. I know where the road dips near Las Varas, where the fog settles in the mountain stretches between Tepic and Guadalajara, where the overnight vendors set up their stands at the stops. I need to tell you about a woman who boarded at Tepic. I should say first that I was dealing with something that had been eating at me for months. My son, 24 years old, a good kid who'd made some poor decisions in his early 20s, had gotten involved with people in Mazatlan that I can describe to you without naming. The kind of people that once they know your family exists, you're never entirely sure what they might do with that knowledge. He'd gotten out, or said he had, and was living with my sister in Hermosillo trying to start clean, but the anxiety didn't leave with him. I was driving 8-hour shifts with that background noise running in my head constantly. Is he safe? Are they looking for him? Am I going to get a call? That's the state I was in on the night of the 7th of August. A full bus, 34 passengers, leaving Tepic at 11:15 p.m. bound for Guadalajara, standard run. 4 hours and change on a highway I know like the inside of my own hands. She boarded at Tepic. I noticed her because she was last. Everyone else had settled and she came to the door just as I was about to close it, appearing at the step the way people do when they've been running and don't want to show it. Middle-aged, dark clothes, a small bag on her shoulder. She showed me her ticket. I didn't look at it carefully. I never do when we're behind schedule. And she went to the back. The drive was unremarkable until we hit the mountain stretch north of Tepic. This is where the highway climbs and twists and the fog comes in from the sea-facing slopes. I know this stretch. I know to slow down, to watch the lane markers, to keep the high beams on the ready. I've driven it in conditions much worse than that August night, which was only lightly fogged. At about the 40-minute mark, my co-driver, a younger man named Porfirio, who was supposed to be resting in the jump seat before his shift, came up to my ear and said quietly, "Hector, the woman in seat 31, look in the overhead mirror." I glanced at the interior mirror. It gives me a view of the entire passenger cabin. I could see the backs of heads, people sleeping, a few phones glowing. Row 31 was at the back. In the seat there was a figure in dark clothes. In the mirror, however, the seat appeared to hold a shape that was not quite the shape of a seated person. It was the right general mass, but the angles were wrong in a way I can't articulate precisely. Like a shape that was approximating a person rather than being one. I looked at the road. I thought about the fog. I thought about my son in Hermosillo and whether he was safe. I looked at the mirror again. "Did she move?" I asked Porfirio. "She hasn't moved since Tepic," he said. "Not once. Not her head, not her hands. Nobody sits that still for 40 minutes on a moving bus." I kept driving. What else do? You keep the bus on the road. You watch the fog. You get your passengers to Guadalajara? We stopped briefly at a rest area near Chapalilla. 15 minutes bathroom break, vendors with cups of atole in the cold. I watched the passengers file out. The woman from seat 31 did not come off the bus. I gave Porfirio a look. He went to the back. He came back up front. "She's there," he said, sitting, eyes open. I asked her if she wanted a break. She didn't respond. "Is she breathing?" I said. "I don't know," he said, and the way he said it told me he hadn't gotten close enough to check. I walked to the back of the bus. She was sitting in seat 31 with her bag in her lap and her eyes open, facing forward. She was looking at the back of the seat in front of her. I said, "Senora, are you all right? We have a 15-minute stop if you want to stretch your legs." Nothing, not a blink, not a breath I could see. I reached out and touched her shoulder. She was cold through the fabric in a way that had nothing to do with the air-conditioned bus. The cold was from inside. Her eyes moved to me. That was the worst part. Not that she turned her head. She didn't, just her eyes moved slowly like something operating with great deliberate care until they were looking directly at me. And then she said in a voice that was perfectly normal and conversational, "You're going to get a call before Guadalajara. Don't be afraid. He's all right." I stepped back. I walked to the front. I told Porfirio what she'd said. He said nothing. We reboarded the passengers. I drove. My phone. In the pouch beside my seat, where I'm required to keep it silenced while driving. Lit up at 12:40 a.m., 30 minutes outside Guadalajara. I saw the screen, my sister in Hermosillo. I didn't answer. I kept driving, but I felt my hands relax on the wheel in a way they hadn't in months. At the Guadalajara terminal, I waited until every passenger had disembarked to check seat 31. The seat was empty. The bus had not stopped. No one had passed me in the aisle. The emergency exit at the back was sealed with its sensor intact. I called my sister when I was off the clock. My son had been approached by two men outside her building that afternoon who'd spoken to him briefly and then left. My sister was frightened, but my son was fine. The men hadn't touched him. They'd only spoken. He's been fine since. The situation seems to have resolved itself. I don't know how to hold that alongside everything else. I don't accept passengers who board at the last moment anymore, or I try not to. The company doesn't understand when I explain my reason, so I've stopped explaining. La Llorona works the night market. Buenos noches, Señor Williams. My name is Dorotea Salinas, and I run a tlayuda stand at the Mercado Nocturno de Oaxaca, the outdoor market that operates along the north side of the second-class bus terminal on Tuesday and Friday nights. I've had this spot for 11 years. My mother had it before me and her mother before her. Tlayudas tasajo memelas. I know this food and this market the way I know my own kitchen. I've fed thousands of people from this spot. I've also seen things from this spot that I don't discuss with most people because in a market full of Oaxacans, you learn quickly that the boundary between the ordinary world and the other one is thinner here than it is in most places. But what happened in March is different from the ordinary strangeness I've come to accept. This one I need to put somewhere outside myself. I was going through something that year that I think a lot of women my age go through, without anyone naming it properly. My children were grown and gone. My oldest in Mexico City working in tech, my youngest in Oaxaca but living her own life. My husband had died 4 years earlier slowly from something that took its time with him. The grief had passed into something quieter, which I thought of as acceptance but which the woman from my church group called, with uncommon gentleness, loneliness of the particular kind that doesn't announce itself. I was 61 years old, working a market stand 3 nights a week, filling the other nights with television and the company of a dog named Pinto. It was a manageable life. It was not an unhappy life, but it was a life with a lot of space in it. That Friday night in March was cold for Oaxaca. Jacket weather, a light wind from the mountains that carried the smell of wood smoke from the surrounding neighborhoods. The market was active but not packed. I had a good crowd between 8 and 10, then the usual slow drift toward 11 as families headed home and left the stands to the night owl crowd. Young people, bus workers, cab drivers finishing their shifts. She came at 11:40. I noticed her before she reached my stand because the market has a particular rhythm and she was moving against it. Not through the crowd the way people do, working around other bodies, but through a space that seemed to open in front of her. She was tall. She was dressed in dark clothes, not a rebozo as I initially thought, but something dark that moved around her in a way that wasn't entirely explained by the wind. Her hair was loose and long and black. She sat on the stool across my counter. I asked what she wanted. She looked at the food. My tlayudas displayed under the heat lamp, the meats on the comal, the chepiche and tasajo, and pointed at the tlayuda de frijoles without speaking. I prepared it. I placed it in front of her. She ate in small, deliberate bites, looking at the counter rather than at the food. Her hands were wrapped around the plate rather than under it. The man at the next stall, Armando, who sells memelas, came to my end of the counter and leaned in with his elbow. "Who's your customer?" he said in a low voice. "Don't know her," I said. "First time." "She was at my stall an hour ago," he said. "She didn't order anything, she just stood there." He paused. "Dorotea, she's crying." I looked at her. Her face was still and directed at the counter. But he was right. Tears were moving down her face in slow, even tracks. No expression, no sound, just tears, the way a house leaks steadily and without urgency. I said softly, "Senora, is everything all right?" She looked up at me. Her eyes were dark and wet, and they held an exhaustion in them that I recognized. The specific exhaustion of a woman who has been carrying something for a very long time. She said quietly, "Have you seen them?" "Seen who?" I said. She looked back down at the plate. She didn't answer. She finished the tlayuda in those careful bites, stood, reached into the dark fabric somewhere and placed money on the counter, exact change for the tlayuda, though I hadn't named a price, and walked away from the stall the same way she'd come, through that odd clearing in the crowd. Armando and I watched her go. At the edge of the market lights, where the road begins and the darkness starts, she stopped walking. She stood there for a moment, and then I swear to you on the memory of my husband and on every year I've had at this market, she was not there anymore, not quickly. Not like a light turning off, just not there the way something has simply ceased to be in a place it was a moment before. Armando said nothing for almost a minute, then he said, "Go count your money." I counted it, it was exact. It had always been exact. I hadn't named a price. I've thought about what she asked me. Have you seen them? I've decided it's a question I can't answer and shouldn't try, and that the asking of it had nothing to do with me. Whatever she's looking for, whatever she's been looking for, I think she's been looking a very long time. I'm still at the market. I still work Tuesdays and Fridays. I keep the heat lamp on all night now, even when the crowd thins out. Some part of me doesn't want to be in the dark if she comes back. Another part knows the light won't matter either way. The engineer's assistant. "Good evening, Senor Williams. I'm writing this from a rental house in Mexicali where I've been living for 4 months since I transferred out of my previous posting. My name is Ignacio Resendiz. I'm a communications technician. I maintain radio relay equipment for a private infrastructure company that services remote installations across northern Mexico. I'm trained, I'm practical. I'm the kind of person who believes every sound has a source and every shadow has a body to cast it. I'm writing to you because after what happened at Relay Station 14 in the Sonoran Desert last November, I am no longer entirely certain of those beliefs. I should tell you about my situation. My younger brother had gone missing in September. Not dramatically, not with violence that anyone witnessed, but the way men go missing in certain parts of northern Mexico where the institutions meant to look for them sometimes don't. He'd gone to Hermosillo for work and stopped calling. The police report I filed was received with the particular patience of people who have filed the same report many times. My parents were devastated. My mother had stopped eating properly. I was the one driving between my posting and their house in Sonora on my days off, covering the gap between what my parents needed and what the authorities were doing, which was almost nothing. I was fraying at the edges. In mid-November, my company sent me a loan to do a maintenance check on Relay Station 14, a remote installation about 60 kilometers from the nearest town, accessible by a dirt road that branches off Federal Highway 2. These stations are unmanned. They're solar-powered, climate-controlled metal boxes on towers, and my job is to arrive, run diagnostics, replace any failed components, log everything, and leave. I do this alone, which doesn't bother me. I've always been comfortable working alone in isolated places. I arrived at Station 14 at 2 in the afternoon. The drive in on the dirt road took 40 minutes from the highway. The desert at that time of year is completely arid. Low scrub, volcanic rock, the occasional carden cactus the size of a small building. The sky is enormous and pale, and the silence is so complete that your own heartbeat seems loud. The station itself is a 2-meter metal box on a 12-meter tower with a ladder and a small ground-level equipment shed. I parked, opened the shed, ran my standard checks. Everything was nominal except a minor calibration issue with the east-facing antenna, which I corrected in about 40 minutes. I logged the work, closed the shed, and began preparing to drive out. That was when I heard the radio. There is a radio receiver inside the equipment shed. Not for communication, but a component of the relay system that picks up certain frequency ranges and retransmits them. It should have been quiet. The shed was closed. But through the metal door I could hear it clearly, a voice speaking in Spanish, in what sounded like one side of a conversation. I reopened the shed. The radio component was showing normal operation on its indicators. The voice was coming through one of the monitoring speakers. Not from the broadcast equipment, but from the diagnostic monitoring line, which should only ever carry technical signal tones. The voice was a man's. He sounded unhurried. He was speaking quietly as if in a small room, and the words were fragmentary through the static. I could make out pieces, not the right road, and he doesn't know yet, and what sounded like a name repeated that was not quite intelligible but that had a rhythmic pattern I recognized. My brother's name has 4 syllables. The pattern I heard had 4 syllables. I stood in the doorway of that equipment shed in the middle of the Sonoran desert, with the late afternoon sun hitting the side of my face, and I could not move. The voice continued for perhaps 90 seconds. Then it was replaced by the standard signal tone that the monitoring line should always carry. I checked the diagnostic logs. The monitoring line showed continuous clean signal. No external input, no anomalous reception. The log showed what the log always showed. I drove out. I did not call anyone that night. I sat in my rental truck at the point where the dirt road meets Federal Highway 2, and I watched the sun go down over Sonora, and I thought about my brother. 3 weeks later, a man walking in an arroyo east of Caborca found my brother's phone in the dirt. The phone was destroyed, but the SIM card survived. The data on it helped investigators determine that my brother had been detained. By whom and for what reason, the investigation is still developing. And released, and that he had walked north. That's the last information. He hasn't been found. But walk north in that desert means something different than walk north elsewhere. The investigators know what it means. My parents don't yet. I'm still deciding how to tell them. I think about the voice in the monitoring line. I think about the phrase I heard, not the right road. I don't know if it was my brother's voice. I don't know if it was anything at all, or if it was the product of a grieving man's mind in an isolated place in the Sonoran desert. What I know is that I heard it, and that when the phone was found 3 weeks later, the last active cell tower it had connected to was within 40 kilometers of relay station Shisi-Dian. I don't go back to remote postings alone anymore. My transfer request cited personal reasons. They approved it without asking for details. Pay attention to what you hear in quiet places, especially the parts that shouldn't be able to speak. The house on Calle Magnolia. Hola, Senor Williams. My name is Amparo Cruz, and I want to start by saying I've never written to anyone like this before. I'm a domestic worker. I clean houses, I cook, sometimes I care for older people who need assistance during the day. I've been doing this work for 16 years, mostly in the Lomas de Chapultepec and Polanco neighborhoods of Mexico City, for families who live in the kind of houses where every room has a name. I know how to be invisible in a house. I know how to read a house's moods the way some people read the weather. After what happened to me on Calle Magnolia, I know something else too. I had taken on a new client in September. A recommendation through a friend of a client, a family named Vertis, or that's what I'll call them. The father worked for an international company, the mother was involved in some cultural foundation, and they had 2 children at a school in Santa Fe. They needed someone Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 hours per visit. The house was large, 5 bedrooms, 3 floors, a garden that a separate person maintained. They were polite, distant in the way that kind of family is, and they paid on time, which is what matters in this work. My situation at that point was complicated by something I'm not ashamed to name. I was in the process of leaving a man who had made my life quietly terrible for 6 years. Not violently. I want to be clear because I know how those stories sound, and this wasn't that. But quietly terrible the way a slow leak is terrible, controlling, isolating, By September, I had moved into a room I rented from a woman in Iztapalapa, and I was rebuilding a life from the floor up. I was worn down in a particular way, hypervigilant, mistrustful of silences, always half expecting something to go wrong. My therapist, a woman I saw twice a month through a program at the Women's Center, called it hyperarousal. I called it not being able to relax in my own skin. On my third Tuesday at the Vertes house, the family left at 8 in the morning as usual, and I began my work on the top floor. The top floor had the master bedroom, a study, and a storage room at the end of the hall that I was told contained the family's archived materials and was to be left alone. I'd been told this at the beginning, and I respected it without curiosity. Every house has a room like that. I was cleaning the study at around 10 in the morning. The study had large windows overlooking the garden and smelled pleasantly of books and the cedar lining of the bookcase. I was dusting the higher shelves when I heard, from the hallway outside the study, the sound of footsteps. Small footsteps. A child's weight on the hardwood floor. I stopped. The family's children were at school. I knew this. I'd seen them leave with their parents at 8. I went to the study door and looked into the hall. The hall was empty. I looked in both directions. Nothing. The door to the storage room at the end of the hall was closed, as it always was. I went back to the study. 2 minutes later, footsteps again, from the direction of the storage room moving toward the study, stopping just outside. I opened the door quickly. The hall was empty. This continued for approximately 40 minutes. The footsteps would start, approach, stop. I checked the hall 8 times. Nothing. My hands were shaking. Not with fear exactly, but with the particular physical response that years of hyperarousal had trained into me, where any unexplained sound registers as a possible threat. I was sweating despite the well-regulated temperature of the house. At 10:50, I stopped in the middle of the hall and simply stood there. If the footsteps came again, I told myself I would not run to look. I would listen. I would determine the direction. I would be systematic. The footsteps came from the storage room, moving toward me and stopping this time about 3 meters away. I said, into the empty hall, "I hear you. I don't know what you want, but I hear you." Silence. Then from directly beside my ear, so close that I felt the displacement of air before I heard the sound, a child's voice said very quietly a single word, "Mama." I left the house. I called the Vertes family from the sidewalk. I told them I had a family emergency. The mother was perfectly pleasant about rescheduling. I came back the following Thursday as if nothing had happened, and nothing happened that Thursday or on any subsequent visit. I never heard the footsteps again. The storage room remained closed and silent. But I asked the woman I rent my room from, who knows everyone and their history and the networks of domestic workers that move through those wealthy neighborhoods, about the Vertes house. She made a phone call. 2 days later, she told me that before the current family, the house on Calle Magnolia had belonged to a family who had lost a child. A young girl in an accident years ago, in the house. I still work there on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I need the income, and the family is decent, and nothing has recurred. But I leave the storage room for last, and when I clean the hallway outside it, I work quickly and I don't stand still. The houses we work in hold more history than the people who live in them know. We are the ones who learn it. Slowly, in the rooms where no one is watching. Pay attention to what a house tries to tell you. And if you hear a child's voice in an empty hall, answer it. There's no harm in being heard. The roadside charm that followed me. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to everyone listening to Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Hector Salazar. I've been a long-haul trucker for 15 years, and I'm writing because I heard a story on your channel last week about a man who kept seeing the same figure in his mirrors, and I realized I've been carrying something similar in silence. I don't want attention, I just want it out of my head. Turn off the lights and stay with me. Because what happened to me on Carretera Federal 57 still doesn't feel finished. I was hauling a refrigerated load from San Luis Potosi toward the north, the kind of run that pays fast because the deadline is cruel. My dispatcher, a guy named Tono, kept calling like the phone owed him money. "Don't stop long," he told me. "Don't get cute. Drop it and come back." I wanted to tell him my life had already stopped in other ways. My divorce had turned the inside of my chest into a hollow room. My ex-wife had taken the apartment, the furniture, and the calm. I kept the truck, the debt, and the habit of waking up at 3 in the morning with my heart sprinting. I was behind on 2 payments. The bank was polite in a way that felt like a knife. That night the highway smelled like hot rubber and dust. The cab had that tired mix of old coffee, engine heat, and the vinyl seat that never truly forgets sweat. I had the window cracked just enough to keep me sharp. The air outside was dry and cold, the kind that stings the nostrils and makes you clench your jaw without noticing. Around Matehuala, I started seeing the same pickup in my mirrors. Far back, always far back. White, no plates that I could catch. Its headlights never bounced, never changed height like real suspension. Just steady, too steady. I told myself it was nothing. I've driven enough nights to know your mind makes patterns out of fatigue. Still, I changed lanes. The pickup changed lanes. I slowed down. It slowed down like it was tied to my speed by a rope. When I finally took an exit for diesel and caffeine, the place was half lit and half asleep, a small station, a taqueria with a humming fluorescent tube, and that heavy silence you only get after midnight when the world is doing its breathing elsewhere. Inside the taqueria, the air was thick with grease and onions, and the coffee smelled burnt in a comforting way, like it had been waiting for me. A couple of other drivers sat in plastic chairs with their caps low. The TV was on but muted. Behind the counter was an older woman with grey hair pulled tight and hands that moved like she'd done this 1,000 years. She looked at my face for 1 second too long. "You're running heavy," she said in Spanish, not about the truck, about me. I forced a laugh. "Heavy load, that's all." She poured coffee without asking, and the steam hit my face like a small confession. "You're not sleeping," she said. I didn't answer. It's embarrassing admitting weakness in places like that. Men don't like to name what's eating them. She slid the cup toward me. Her fingers were dry and clean, but when they touched the counter, it left a faint damp mark like cold condensation. "Don't take the shortcut near Galeana," she said. "Not tonight." "I'm not going that way," I lied, because I was exactly going that way. It saved time. Her eyes didn't blink. "Then don't stop when you hear your name." That made my throat tighten. "What?" She reached under the counter and brought up a small cloth bundle tied with red thread. Not a joke bundle, not a tourist thing. It looked like it had lived in a drawer full of prayers. "You drivers laugh," she said, "until something follows you into the cab." I wanted to stand up and leave. I wanted to call her crazy and be done with it. But I remembered the white pickup sitting out there in the dark, perfectly still. "How much?" I asked like it was a product. She shook her head. "It's not for money, it's for leaving me alone." She pressed the bundle into my palm. It was warm. That's what I remember the most. How warm it was, like it had been against someone's skin. "Hang it where you can't forget it," she said. "And if you see it move, don't touch it." I laughed too loud. One of the other drivers glanced at me with that look that says don't start nonsense in the night. Back in the truck, I hung the charm from the mirror. It swayed slightly as the cab settled. The air felt different, colder but clean like after rain even though the sky was clear. I pulled out and merged back onto Federal 57. The white pickup came with me. At first it stayed in the far mirror. Then it got closer without ever accelerating. It was just suddenly closer, as if distance had been folded like paper. My radio crackled. Not the normal static. A wet, whispery sound like someone breathing too close to a microphone. I hit the button. "Breaker, anyone on?" Silence. Then, through the speaker, I heard it, soft and unmistakable. "Hector." My hands went slick on the wheel. I told myself it was some prank. I told myself it was fatigue. But the voice didn't sound like a prank. It sounded like someone trying to use my name the way you use a key. I remembered what the woman said. "Don't stop when you hear your name." I didn't stop. I kept going, jaw clenched, eyes burning. The charm swung once gently like the truck had hit a bump, but the road was smooth. The charm swung again, then it twisted on its own, turning toward the driver's side window like it was listening. I didn't touch it. A few kilometers later, I saw flashing lights up ahead, a checkpoint, 2 vehicles angled across the shoulder, and a man in a reflective vest waving cars to slow down. It looked official enough from a distance, but something in the way the lights strobed made my skin crawl. Too bright, too blue. I rolled down the window an inch, diesel fumes mixed with cold night air. The man stepped up. He didn't smell like police. He smelled like cheap cologne and cigarettes. "Buenas noches," he said. "Papers." I handed him my documents. My heart was beating in my neck. Behind him, the white pickup had stopped too, parked with its lights off like it didn't need them anymore. The man leaned closer. "You're hauling something valuable," he said quietly. "You want to keep moving, you help me out." Extortion, plain as day. Human evil, the kind you can put a name on. I swallowed. "I don't carry cash like that." He smiled with no warmth. "Then we check your load. We take our time." Behind him the night felt crowded, like there were more people than I could see. The radio crackled again. "Hector." The man's smile faltered. "Who's calling you?" My mouth went dry. The charm began to sway harder, like it was caught in wind, but the window was barely open. The inside of the cab smelled suddenly like damp earth, like soil turned over at a graveyard. The man took a step back, his eyes flicked to my mirror. "'Kay," he whispered, and his voice lost its confidence. In my side mirror, there was movement. Not the pickup, not the highway. A shape near the shoulder, low to the ground, like a dog, but wrong in the way it held itself. Too still, too patient. And its eyes, reflecting faintly, looked like they were inside the mirror, not outside it. The man backed away faster now, pretending he wasn't. "Go," he said sharply, waving me off as if he'd just remembered an appointment. "Move it, move." I didn't argue. I didn't say thank you. I put the truck in gear and rolled forward, my whole body shaking. In the mirror I saw him stand there with his hands at his sides, staring at my cab like he was seeing something perched on it. When I got speed again, the white pickup wasn't behind me anymore. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt watched. For the next hour, nothing happened. The road was empty. The sky was dark and clean, stars sharp like needles. My eyes started to sting with exhaustion and adrenaline. That's when I noticed the charm. It wasn't hanging where I left it. It was still on the mirror, but the cloth bundle had rotated so the knot faced me like a little fist. And the red thread looked darker, damp at the ends, as if it had been dipped in something. I kept both hands on the wheel. I told myself I wouldn't touch it. The radio stayed silent. The truck hummed steadily, tires singing on asphalt. My breathing slowed, but my mind kept circling the same question. What did that charm scare away? The men, or what was using my name? Near the turnoff I'd planned, the shortcut by Galeana, I saw a sign and felt my stomach drop. The older woman's voice replayed in my head. "Don't take the shortcut near Galeana, not tonight." I stayed on the main route even though it cost me time, even though Tono would yell, even though the penalty would sting. I took the longer road and delivered late. Tono screamed. The client complained. The bank called the next day anyway. But I'm alive. And here's why I'm writing, Senor Williams, why I can't just chalk it up to stress. 2 nights after that run, I woke up in my sleeper berth with my heart racing. The cab was cold enough that my breath showed. The smell of damp earth was back, thick and unmistakable, like someone had brought a shovel into my truck. The radio was off, but the speaker clicked once, like it was waking up. Then, very softly, like a finger tapping glass from the other side, my name came again. "Hector." I didn't answer. I didn't move. And above me from the mirror the charm swayed like it was nodding, slow, patient, as if it was reminding me of a rule I couldn't afford to forget. My advice, it's simple, and I'm not trying to sound brave or moral. If you're driving alone at night and you hear your name come from a place it shouldn't, don't stop to prove you're not scared. Don't answer to prove you're not crazy. Because some things don't need your belief. They only need your attention. And now another story from the night roads, this one from the markets where the lights never quite reach the corners. The boy who waited behind my stand. "Hello, Senor Williams, and greetings to everyone in Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Marisol Andrade. I sell tacos and coffee in a night market in Ciudad Juarez, and I'm writing because my mother is sick, bills are stacking like dirty dishes, and I can't sleep since the night I saw a child where no child should have been. Please, turn off the lights and listen. I hope I'm not interrupting your sleep, but I need to say this out loud, even if my voice shakes. I work in the kind of place that never fully closes. The market breathes even at 2 in the morning. Oil popping on grills, radios playing corridos from cheap speakers, men laughing too loud, women counting coins with tired fingers. The air is always mixed, fried meat, burned sugar, damp cardboard, and that sour smell the dumpsters keep like a secret. My stand is small, a folding table, a tarp overhead that flaps when the wind gets impatient, a cooler with soda, a pot of beans that's been reheated so many times it tastes like survival. That week, I'd been living on coffee and worry. My mother's kidneys were failing. The clinic told me words that felt like a cold war. Tests, appointments, waiting lists. I didn't have time for lists. I had time for cash. A man named Cesar, not my boyfriend, not my husband, just the market organizer, came by every night to collect a rent. It wasn't rent, it was extortion with a smile. If you didn't pay, your top got cut, your table got kicked, your life got complicated. "Don't make me come back twice," Cesar said, tapping my jaw with his knuckle. I smiled like I didn't hate him. "I'll have it tomorrow." That night the wind was cold, dry and steady. It carried dust and the smell of exhaust from the avenue. I was wiping down the table, my hands stiff, my shoulders aching, thinking about my mother's face when she tried to pretend she wasn't scared. That's when I saw him. A small boy, maybe 6 or 7, standing behind my stand near the stacked plastic crates. He was too clean for the market, too still. He wore a white shirt that looked like it had never met dirt. At first I thought he was lost. "Hey," I said gently, "where's your mama?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the ground, like he was watching something under the dust. I stepped around the table, my shoes crunched on grit. "Are you okay?" He turned his head slightly, and I felt a chill run through my arms because his eyes didn't track like normal eyes. They looked unfocused, like he was looking through me, not at me. Then he lifted his hand and pointed, not at me, not at the street, but at the tarp above us. The tarp fluttered, and for a second, in the shifting light, it looked like there was a small wet handprint on the inside of it. I blinked. The handprint wasn't there anymore, but my throat tightened. "Do you need help?" Behind me, someone laughed loudly. A bottle clinked. Life kept moving like nothing was wrong. The boy took one slow step backward, into the shadow behind the crates. "Wait," I started. He was gone. I searched behind the stand, moving crates, looking under the table, checking between other stalls. Nothing. No footprints, no sound. I told myself I imagined it. I was tired, I was stressed, I was desperate. Brains do strange things when they're hungry and scared. I tried to keep working, but the market felt different. The light seemed weaker. The corners felt deeper. I could feel eyes on me, not from people, but from the spaces between people. Cesar came back later, irritated. "Tomorrow better be good," he said. "I told you," I snapped before I could stop myself. "I have a sick mother." He looked at me like illness was an inconvenience. "Not my problem." He walked away and I hated him so much my teeth hurt. Then I heard a soft sound from behind my stand. A cough. Small, dry, like a child trying not to be noticed. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly. My hands were damp with dishwater and my skin prickled as if the air had turned sharp. Behind the crates, the boy stood again in the same spot, his white shirt glowing faintly under the market light. This time his face was different. Not injured, not bloody, nothing like that. Just wrong in a quiet way. Too pale, like candle wax. Lips slightly blue, as if he'd been cold for a long time. I felt tears sting my eyes for no reason I could explain. "Please," I whispered, "where is your mother?" He lifted his hand again and pointed, not up this time, but toward the alley behind the market. The alley that smelled like old urine, rotting fruit and wet cardboard. The alley where stray dogs fought over scraps. The alley everyone avoided. I didn't want to go. Every part of me screamed no. But something in me, maybe the part that couldn't save my mother, felt pulled by the idea of saving someone else. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight and walked, my legs shaky. The alley was narrow and darker than it should have been. My light cut a thin tunnel through stacked boxes and trash bags. The air felt colder there, damp in a way the desert shouldn't allow. I could hear water dripping somewhere, rhythmic like a clock. Halfway down, my flashlight flickered. I swore under my breath, "Not now." Then I heard it again. My name. Marisol. It wasn't a loud voice, it wasn't dramatic. It sounded like someone trying to get my attention gently, like a friend at a party. I froze. The voice came from the darkness ahead, not behind me. My heart hammered. I backed up one step. "Who's there?" I called, trying to make my voice firm. No answer, just a quiet drip, drip, drip. I turned to run back, but the mouth of the alley didn't look the same. The market lights were dimmer farther away. The sounds of people felt muted, like someone had put a hand over the world. That's when I saw something on the ground. Small footprints in the dust. Bare footprints. They weren't leading away, they were leading toward me. My chest tightened and my legs went weak. A shape moved at the end of the alley, low, quick, like a child ducking behind something. I swung my light and caught a glimpse of white. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "I'm trying to help you." The shape didn't stop. I followed, because fear does strange things. It can make you run, but it can also make you chase what you don't understand, like if you catch it, you'll have control. At the end of the alley, there was a chain-link fence separating the market from a vacant lot. The lot was littered with broken glass that reflected my phone light like tiny stars. Beyond it, the street ran empty, the asphalt shining faintly. The boy was standing on the other side of the fence. How he got there, I don't know. He looked at me, his eyes still unfocused, and lifted his hand to the fence. On the metal right where his fingers touched, frost bloomed, white and delicate like breath on glass. I stumbled backward, my mouth open, unable to form words. The boy pointed past the lot toward the street where a bus stop sign stood alone, bent slightly like it had been hit before. A bus was there. An old bus, idling, lights on, doors open. But there were no people inside, no driver, no passengers. Just empty seats glowing under the interior light. My phone light flickered again and the bus light flickered with it, as if the two were connected. "Marisol," the soft voice said again, not from the bus, not from the boy, but from somewhere close. Too close, like it was right beside my ear. I spun around and my flashlight beam shook across the fence, the trash, the alley. Nothing. When I looked back, the boy was gone. The bus doors closed slowly, gently, like a mouth deciding not to speak. Then the bus rolled forward, silent, smooth, and disappeared into the empty street, without turning its headlights brighter, without making the sound a bus should make. I ran back to the market, breathless, hands shaking, tears I didn't understand spilling down my face. Cesar was there talking to someone. He glanced at me and frowned. "You okay?" I wanted to tell him what I saw. I wanted to make him feel the same fear, but the market swallowed my words. I packed up early that night. I went home. I sat beside my mother's bed and listened to her breathing, counting each one like it mattered. Here's the part that won't let me go. The next morning, when I unfolded my top to dry it, there was a small wet handprint on the inside, right above where I stood at my table. Perfectly shaped, too small for an adult, too clear to be old. And sometimes when I'm working late and the wind shifts, I hear a child cough behind my stand. My advice is simple. If you're in a market at night and you see a child alone where children don't belong, don't follow them into the shadows no matter how much your heart wants to help. Because the night doesn't always bring you back the same. And now let's move to another voice. Someone who works while the city sleeps, collecting what everyone else throws away. The tape I found on my route. "Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to the people of Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Ivan Rios. I work sanitation in Monterrey night shift, and I'm writing because I found something in the trash that should have stayed buried in someone's past. I heard a story on your channel about cursed radio frequencies, and I told myself it was just entertainment, until my own route started answering me back. Turn off the lights and listen, because I swear I'm not the kind of man who invents things. Night garbage work is a strange life. You learn the city by its smells. You can tell the rich neighborhoods by the perfume drifting from their bags, and the poor ones by the sour mix of old food and damp cardboard. You know which streets have dogs that will chase your truck and which ones are quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. That week, I was doing extra shifts because my brother was out of work again, and my mom kept calling like her worries were bills I had to pay. On top of that, I had a court date coming up from a stupid fight months back. Nothing major, but enough to make me feel like the city had my name on a list. My partner on the route was Memo, a quiet guy with tired eyes. We worked in a rhythm: stop, lift, toss, crush, move. The truck's hydraulics groaned like an old animal. The air smelled like diesel and rot. The streetlights made everything look pale and sick. Near a neighborhood by an old industrial area, Memo kicked aside a torn bag and said, "Look at this." There was a small cardboard box taped shut. Not the usual kind. Clean. Careful. Someone had thrown it out like they were trying to get rid of it without looking at it too long. Inside, wrapped in a towel, was a cassette player, old school, the kind my dad used to have, and with it one tape labeled in black marker. "Don't play after midnight," Memo snorted. "People are dramatic." I should have left it, but something about it bothered me in a way I couldn't explain, like finding a key on the ground and knowing it fits a door you don't want to open. I took it home anyway. My apartment smelled like laundry detergent and stale ramen. I sat at my kitchen table under the buzzing light, the tape in my hand. It was 12:17 a.m. I laughed at myself. "I'm not superstitious," I said out loud, like the room needed reassurance. I pressed play. At first it was just static, then a low hum, then a voice, male, calm, like a dispatch operator. "Unit 12, respond." I froze. My route truck was Unit 12. I rewound, played again. Same thing. Then the tape clicked and I heard something that made my stomach drop. My own voice. "I copy," the tape said in my exact tone. "On my way." My skin prickled. I stopped the tape and stared at the player like it had grown teeth. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe someone recorded a sanitation route. Maybe I was imagining the similarity. But the next night on the job, my radio, our real radio, crackled. "Unit 12, dispatch said, respond." Memo looked at me. "That's us." I grabbed the mic. "Copy." And then, through the radio speaker, beneath the real dispatch voice, there was a faint second layer, like an echo. "I copy," it whispered. Memo's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" I didn't answer. My mouth was dry. We kept moving, trying to ignore it, trying to work like normal. But the night felt wrong now, like the city had a second heartbeat. Streetlights flickered more than usual. Dogs stared too long. The air felt colder, damp around our ankles, like fog that didn't belong. Around 2:30 a.m., we stopped near a closed warehouse lot, the kind of place where graffiti looks like warnings and the shadows feel inhabited. We got out to pull bins from the curb. The metal lids were cold enough to sting. My gloves were damp from leaking bags, and the smell of spoiled meat hit me so hard I gagged. Memo muttered, "Hate this street." "Yeah," I said. "Let's be quick." As I lifted a bin, I heard it. A soft clicking sound, like a cassette player button being pressed. It came from inside the truck. Memo frowned. "You leave something on?" "No," I said, my heart starting to race. We climbed up into the cab. The radio was off, the dashboard lights were steady, but there was a sound coming from the glove compartment, faint, rhythmic. Click, work, click. I opened it with shaking hands. The cassette player was there. I hadn't brought it to work. I left it on my kitchen table, I was sure I did. The tape was inside, and it was playing. Static poured out, then a voice, my voice again. "I'm right behind you," it said softly. Memo stepped back like the sound had pushed him. "What the hell is that?" I hit stop. The player didn't stop. The reels kept turning. I ripped the tape out, my hands trembling, and the sound continued for a second anyway, like the truck itself had learned the recording. Then it stopped. The silence afterward was thick and suffocating. We drove the rest of the route with the radio off, speaking only when we had to. Every time the truck slowed, I felt like something was about to climb into the cab with us. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. At the final drop-off, as dawn started to thin the night, Memo said, "Throw it away." I nodded. "Yeah." We took the cassette player and tossed it into the compactor pile. I watched it disappear under crushed cardboard and broken furniture. I felt relief. For exactly 5 seconds. Then the yard's loudspeaker crackled, an old speaker that hadn't worked right in years, always distorted. Through it came a soft, familiar voice. My voice. "Unit 12, it said calmly. "Respond." I stood there, frozen, the early morning air cold on my neck. Memo swore under his breath, eyes wide, face pale. We walked away without looking back. I wish that was the end. But last night at home, I found my kitchen table empty, no cassette player, no tape, and then I heard a soft whirring sound from my closet. Click, whir, click. I haven't opened the closet. My advice, don't take home something that feels like a warning. Some things aren't trash, they're discarded on purpose. The motel room that didn't let me leave. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to everyone in Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Daniel Meza. I'm not proud of what I'm about to admit, but I'm writing because guilt has a way of making you hear things in the dark. And sometimes, the dark answers back. Please, turn off the lights and stay with me. If you're listening in bed, don't sit up too fast. Some stories follow the motion. I used to tell myself I wasn't a bad man, just a tired one. A man who made mistakes. I was married, still am, on paper. And I had been seeing someone else, someone who made me feel like I could breathe. It's not an excuse, it's just the truth. We met at a roadside motel off Highway 15 in Sinaloa, the kind of place that sells rooms by the hour and pretends it's normal. Neon sign buzzing, curtains that smelled like smoke, sheets that looked clean until you stared too long. That night I told my wife I had an extra shift. I told my lover I'd be quick. I told myself the lie was temporary, like a bandage. The motel parking lot was empty except for one truck and a stray cat that watched me like it knew my name. The air smelled of hot asphalt cooling down, mixed with cheap chlorine from the small pool no one used. Inside the room, the AC rattled like it had loose bones. The mirror on the wall faced the door, which bothered me immediately. I don't know why, it felt like the room wanted me to watch myself come and go. My lover Elena arrived late, nervous. "I thought you weren't coming," she whispered. "I'm here," I said, forcing a smile. We didn't talk much. We tried to act like this was normal. But the room felt wrong in small ways. The curtains moved when there was no breeze. The bathroom light flickered in a pattern. 3 quick flashes, a pause, 3 again. Elena noticed too. "This place gives me a bad feeling." I tried to laugh it off. "It's a motel. They're all bad." Then we heard it. Tiny footsteps. Not outside, inside, on the floor near the bed. Elena sat up. "Did you bring someone?" "What?" I said, annoyed. "No." The footsteps stopped. We stared at each other, listening. Then something slid across the table by the wall, small keychain I hadn't touched. It moved slowly as if pulled by invisible fingers. Elena's face went pale. "Stop messing with me." "I'm not," I said, and I meant it. I stood up and turned on every light. The room looked ordinary, cheap furniture, a Bible in the drawer, a faint stain on the ceiling like water damage, no hiding place, no person. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Behind me, near the bathroom door, there was a small shape low to the ground like a child crouched in shadow. It wasn't clear, it wasn't detailed, just a presence that didn't belong. I spun around. Nothing. I looked back at the mirror. The shape was still there. Elena grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Daniel, what is that?" "I don't know," I whispered. The shape shifted slightly, as if it was turning its head, but it never stepped into full light. It stayed half hidden, like it understood the rules of being seen. I remembered something I'd heard on your channel, Senior Williams, about places that collect secrets, about rooms that hold what people bring into them. Elena started to cry quietly. "I want to leave." I nodded. "Okay, now." I grabbed my shirt, my keys, my phone. Elena hurried to the door. The doorknob was cold, too cold. Elena twisted it. It didn't move. She tried again, harder. The knob clicked, but the latch didn't release. My throat tightened. It stuck. It happens. I pulled. Nothing. We both pushed our weight against the door. It didn't budge, like the frame had fused. The AC stopped suddenly. The room went quiet except for our breathing. From somewhere close, inside the walls, inside the mirror, inside the air, we heard a soft sound like whispering. Not words, just the feeling of voices trying to form. Elena covered her ears. "Make it stop." I ran to the window. It was barred. Of course it was. Motels like this don't want people climbing out. My phone had no signal. I tried the bathroom door. It opened easily. Too easily. The bathroom light turned on by itself. The mirror above the sink was fogged as if someone had showered, but the air was dry. On the fogged mirror, a small handprint appeared. Slowly, like an invisible hand pressed from the other side. Lena screamed and backed into the room. I stood frozen, my heart hammering. The handprint stayed there, clear, small, perfect. Then it slid downward, leaving a streak as if something was dragging fingers along glass. Not speaking, not explaining, just showing itself. The room felt colder, My skin tightened over my arms. The main mirror, the one facing the door, caught my eye again. In it, the crouched shape was closer now, still half shadow, but nearer to the bed. And then behind it, I saw something else. A figure outside our door in the hallway, male, tall, standing too still. A human shape. My blood turned to ice. Elena whispered, "Is that your wife?" I couldn't answer, because the figure's face wasn't clear. It was blurred, as if the mirror couldn't decide who it was. But it felt accusatory. The doorknob rattled once, softly, like someone testing it. Then again, harder. Elena grabbed my sleeve. "We're trapped." The whispering sound grew louder, like a crowd behind thin fabric. The door rattled a third time, and I backed away from it, instinct screaming. Then suddenly the room's main mirror reflected something impossible. Me standing by the door holding the knob while I was across the room. I stared at my own reflection self. He looked tired. He looked guilty. He looked like a man who had made choices. His hand turned the knob. The latch clicked. The door opened, only in the mirror. In the reflection, the hallway was dark and empty. My reflection stepped out, and the door in the mirror closed behind him. In the real room, the door remained shut, unmoving. Elena sobbed. "Daniel, what did you do?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if the room had taken something from me, or if guilt had finally learned to look back. After what felt like hours, the AC kicked back on. The lights steadied. The door opened normally, as if it had never been locked. We ran. We didn't speak in the parking lot. We didn't look back. I drove home with my hands shaking, the smell of chlorine clinging to my skin. I ended things with Elena after that. I tried to be better. I tried to be honest. But sometimes when I'm alone at home and I pass a mirror in the dark, I see myself a half second late, like my reflection is deciding whether to follow me. My advice? Don't go to motels where you wouldn't take your mother. Don't build a second life in cheap rooms. Because some places don't judge you with words. They just keep a copy. The dog that kept my speed. Hello, Senor Williams, and greetings to everyone listening to Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Oscar Villalobos. I drive deliveries on the Durango to Mazatlan highway, and I'm writing because I thought the most dangerous thing on that road was human, until something started pacing my truck like it knew my destination. Turn off the lights and stay with me. This is not a story I tell at family dinners. I'm not from Durango originally. I came from further south, chasing work after my father got sick and my job disappeared. People talk about migration like it's a choice you make with a smile. For me, it was hunger with paperwork. I got a delivery job, no questions, low pay, long hours. My boss, Rafa, treated me like a replaceable part. Drive, don't think, he'd say. If something happens, it didn't happen. That night, I was hauling a small but urgent load, medical supplies, toward Mazatlan. Deadline tight, weather shifting, the road twisting like a nervous thought. The highway at night smells like pine and hot brakes. You pass mountains that feel like sleeping animals. The wind hits your door and makes it groan. Your headlights carve tunnels through darkness. I was already tense because Rafa had warned me about checkpoints, real ones and fake ones. If they stop you, he said, be polite, don't be heroic. I kept my radio low. I kept my eyes scanning. Near a stretch where the road bends sharply and the guardrails look like old scars, I saw it on the shoulder. A dog. Large, dark, running. At first I didn't think anything of it. Dogs chase vehicles sometimes, but this one wasn't chasing. It was pacing me. Same speed, same distance, too smooth for an animal on uneven shoulder. Its paws hit the ground without slipping, without stumbling. It ran like it had practiced. I slowed down slightly. It slowed. I sped up. It sped. My chest tightened. Go home, I muttered as if it could understand. The dog turned its head toward me briefly. Its eyes caught my headlights and reflected, bright, almost pale like wet stones. Then it faced forward again, still pacing. I told myself it was just a dog. But then the temperature inside my cab dropped sharp and sudden. My breath fogged the windshield slightly at the edges even though the heater was on. The radio crackled, just a brief burst of static, then quiet. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Behind me, in the far distance, headlights appeared. 2 vehicles, low and fast. Human danger. That I understood. My hands tightened on the wheel. The dog on the shoulder kept running, unbothered by the approaching cars. The vehicles got closer fast, weaving slightly. That weaving isn't drunk driving, it's someone testing you, seeing how you react. I checked my speed, I was within the limit, I didn't want to give a reason. But the road here doesn't care about your reasons. The dog suddenly veered closer to my lane. I flinched, instinctively turning the wheel a fraction to avoid it. My tires hit the rumble strip, the truck shuddered. The vehicles behind me surged closer. One flashed its high beams, aggressive, demanding. I felt panic rise like bile. A voice in my head, my mother's, said, "Don't provoke them." Another voice, my own fear, said, "They already chose you." The dog looked up at me again, and for a second I swear its face didn't look like a dog's face. The muzzle seemed longer, the silhouette wrong, like the headlights were showing me a different shape layered under the first. My skin prickled. The dog leaped forward, faster, as if it wanted to pull me. The first vehicle behind me swerved into the left lane, trying to come alongside. I could see two men inside, faces shadowed. One lifted a hand, gesturing pull over. I shook my head, even though they couldn't see it clearly. The dog ran closer to the front of my truck now, just ahead of my headlights, leading me. I didn't want to follow it, but the road was narrow. The men behind me were real. The dog was something else. Ahead, I saw a small service turnoff, just a dirt path barely marked. The kind of turnoff you wouldn't take unless you knew it. The dog veered toward it. My heart pounded. "No," I whispered. But the men behind me were closing in, and I imagined them forcing me off somewhere worse. So I turned. The truck bounced onto the dirt path, suspension groaning, gravel flying. The headlights shook violently, illuminating trees and rocks in jerky flashes. The air smelled like damp soil and pine sap. Behind me, the vehicles hesitated, their headlights hovered at the entrance, then stopped. They didn't follow. I sat there, breathing hard, hands trembling, listening to my engine tick and cool. The silence around me was heavy, layered with night sounds. Distant insects wind through branches. I looked for the dog. It wasn't there. The temperature in the cab rose slightly, like something had released its grip. I waited a long time before moving again. When I finally backed out and returned to the highway, the road was empty. I made the delivery late. Rafa cursed me. I didn't care. But here's the part that keeps me awake. A week later, on the same highway, I saw the dog again. Same shoulder, same pacing. And this time, when it turned its head toward me, the reflection in its eyes looked like a human looking back, briefly, quietly, before it faced forward and kept running, as if it had places to be. My advice: on dangerous roads, fear the people first. But don't assume the night is empty just because you don't see anyone. Sometimes something runs beside you, not to attack, not to help. Just to make sure you don't go where you are not supposed to go. The call button that lit up by itself. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to everyone in Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Camila Torres. I'm a nurse on the night shift in a public hospital in Guadalajara, and I'm writing because there's a wing of the hospital that doesn't officially operate anymore, but it still calls for help. Turn off the lights, please. If you work nights too, you'll understand how thin reality gets around 3 in the morning. Hospitals at night are their own world. The air always smells like disinfectant and old coffee. The floors shine under fluorescent lights like they're wet even when they're dry. The beeping of monitors becomes a language you hear in your sleep. I took night shifts because I needed the money. My father's diabetes was getting worse and my brother vanished into his own life. I also took nights because the day staff had started whispering about me, about my anxiety, about how I checked locks twice, how I washed my hands until my skin cracked. Camila's paranoid, they said. I didn't argue, I just worked. There's a wing on the 4th floor that used to be pediatrics. It's closed now, locked behind a door with a sign that says maintenance only. Everyone knows it's there. No one goes, not because of ghosts, because of bureaucracy, because of mold, because it's easier to pretend emptiness is safe. That night I was charting at the nurse's station when the elevator dinged. Not unusual. But then I heard it again. Ding. Again. Ding. Like someone was pressing the call button repeatedly. I stood up. Is someone playing with it? The security guard, Louise, shrugged. Probably a visitor. No visitors after midnight, I said. He smirked. Then it's a ghost. I didn't laugh. I walked toward the elevator. The hall was quiet. The lights hummed. My shoes squeaked softly on the polished floor. The elevator doors were closed, but the call button outside was lit. I pressed it to reset it. It stayed lit. My skin prickled. The doors slid open. The elevator was empty. I stepped inside. The air smelled colder in there, metallic like coins. The buttons panel glowed, and the 4 button was already pressed. I stared at it. I hadn't pressed it. I hit close. The door shut. The elevator began to move. I should have gotten out, I know that now. But tiredness and routine can make you do stupid things. You tell yourself it's electrical. You tell yourself you're not scared. You tell yourself you're in a hospital. What could a hospital do to you? The elevator stopped. 4th floor. The doors opened to a dark hallway. The lights should have been on. Motion sensors should have triggered. But the corridor beyond the doors looked swallowed, like the building had forgotten to fill it with light. I stood there, my heart pounding, the smell of disinfectant replaced by something else, dust and stale water and a faint sweetness like old baby powder. From the darkness I heard a sound. A small toy melody, faint, distorted, like a music box dying. I stepped out, my phone light on. The beam cut through dust motes, revealing peeling paint, covered equipment, and a row of closed doors. Then I saw it. At the end of the hall, a call button panel on the wall, like the ones by patient beds, was blinking. Call light. Active. My throat tightened. I walked closer. My footsteps sounded too loud. The call light blinked steadily, patiently, like someone waiting. I didn't hear crying, I didn't hear voices, just that faint toy melody somewhere deeper. I reached the panel and pressed cancel. The light turned off. For one breath, the hallway felt normal. Then the light turned on again. I stepped back, my skin cold. "Hello?" I called, my voice weak. No answer. The toy melody stopped. The air felt heavier, as if the hallway was holding its breath with me. I turned my phone light toward the nearest door. The sign on it, half peeled, still read, Pediatria. I thought about the stories I'd heard on your channel, Senor Williams. How places carry memory like smell. How trauma stains walls even after paint. I told myself I'd leave. I'd tell maintenance. I'd tell security. I'd pretend this was a wiring problem. Then I saw something on the floor. Small footprints in dust leading from the darkness toward me. Not shoe prints. Bare. My stomach lurched. I backed up slowly, my heart racing, breathing shallow. Behind me, the elevator doors were still open, waiting. The call light blinked again, faster this time. And then the intercom speaker in the hallway crackled. The old one that wasn't even connected to our current system. A voice came through, thin, distorted, not speaking clearly, but making a sound like someone trying to form words without a throat. Not a human voice you can answer, not something that explains, just the feeling of need. My eyes stung with tears I didn't expect. I turned and ran into the elevator. As the doors closed, I looked back down the hallway. In my phone light's last sweep, I saw a small shape in a doorway, low, still watching. No face clearly, no mouth moving, just a presence that made my bones feel cold. The elevator door shut. I hit the button for the lobby repeatedly like it was a prayer. Back at the nurse's station, Louis looked at my face and stopped joking. "You okay?" I lied. "Wiring issue, I'll report it." But that wasn't the end. Because ever since that night, sometimes when I'm on shift and the hospital is quiet, I see the 4 button light up in the elevator panel by itself, like someone is calling it. And sometimes when I'm alone in a hallway, I hear the faintest toy melody behind me, just out of reach of my hearing. My advice? If you work in places where people suffer, hospitals, prisons, shelters, don't assume the building forgets when you do. Some call buttons never stop blinking. The passenger who never looked up. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to the community of Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Ricardo Ricky Linares. I drive rideshare nights in Tijuana, mostly near the border, and I'm writing because I picked up a passenger who didn't speak and still managed to threaten me. Turn off the lights and stay with me. If you're listening with headphones, keep one ear free. You'll understand why. Night driving in Tijuana is a mix of neon, exhaust, and nerves. You learn which streets to avoid, which corners belong to who, and how to keep your eyes moving without staring. I drove nights because daytime traffic makes me anxious. Nights are quieter, usually. Also, I had debt, credit cards, a sick aunt, life squeezing me from both ends. At 1:40 a.m., I got a pickup request near a warehouse area close to the border lanes. The pin was precise, like someone who didn't want me guessing. When I arrived, a man was waiting under a streetlight, hood up, hands in pockets. He got in the back seat without greeting. "Good evening," I said. "Name?" He didn't answer. I checked the app. The rider name was just one letter, M. "Where to?" I asked. He lifted his phone slightly, screen facing me, showing the destination already set. I drove. The car smelled like my usual air freshener trying to cover old fast food. But when he got in, a new scent entered, damp cloth and something faintly metallic like wet coins. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror. He sat perfectly still, head down, looking at his phone. I couldn't see his eyes. Halfway through a darker street, my phone lost signal for a moment. The map froze. I muttered, "Come on." From the back seat, the man's phone made a soft notification sound. Then mine did too. A message appeared on my screen through the rideshare app chat. "Don't stop." I frowned. "Sir, is that you?" No response. A second message. "Don't look back." My mouth went dry. I glanced up at the mirror out of instinct. In the mirror, the back seat looked empty. But I could feel him behind me. I could smell him. I could hear his breathing. I swallowed hard and stared forward. The streetlights flickered as I passed beneath them, one by one, like the city was blinking slowly. Another message. "Left turn. Now." That wasn't the route. I shouldn't have listened, but fear makes you obedient. I turned left. The road narrowed into a quieter neighborhood, houses closed up, dogs barking behind fences. My car's engine sounded too loud here, like it was announcing me. Then I saw why he told me to turn. Ahead, a car sat sideways across the street, blocking it, hazard lights off. A human setup, the kind of thing you hear about, the kind of thing that ends badly. I slowed, my heart hammering. From the back seat, the passenger finally moved. I heard fabric shift, a soft tap on the glass. He didn't speak. He just tapped again. My phone buzzed. Reverse. I threw the car into reverse and backed up fast, tires crunching gravel, my hands shaking on the wheel. The blocked car didn't move. No one stepped out. But I could feel eyes watching. I backed out to the previous street and drove fast, breath shallow. In the mirror, the seat still looked empty. But the passenger's presence felt stronger now, closer to my neck like cold air behind my ear. We reached the destination, a small apartment building with a broken gate. The passenger got out silently, still never looking up. Before he closed the door, he paused, head still down, and placed something on my front passenger seat. A small folded paper. Then he walked away into darkness. I didn't touch the paper until I was a few blocks away. My hands were shaking, my mouth tasted like fear. When I unfolded it, it was a printed screenshot from my social media profile, my name, my face, my aunt's address tagged in an old post I forgot existed. Under it in neat handwriting. "You were lucky tonight, don't be curious next time." No signature, no explanation. I pulled over under a streetlight, sweating, breathing hard, feeling my heart slam against my ribs. When I looked up at the rearview mirror for 1 second, I saw him, my passenger, sitting in the back seat again, head down. Then the seat was empty. I drove home without picking up another ride. My advice? In border cities, assume every silent passenger is dangerous, human or otherwise. Don't chase mystery for a good story. Because some warnings arrive through your phone. And some arrive through your mirror. The seat that always stayed wet. Hello, Senor Williams. And hello to everyone listening to Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Sofia Barrera. I'm an overnight bus driver on the route from Veracruz toward Puebla, and I'm writing because there's one seat on my bus that never stays dry, no matter how many times we clean it. Turn off the lights, please, and listen close. If you've ever taken a night bus, you'll recognize the feeling. Driving a night bus is a job built on routine. You check tires, lights, paperwork, you count passengers, you listen to the engine like it's a living thing. You keep your face neutral because people get nervous if the driver looks nervous. I started doing this job after my husband left. Just left. Like a light turned off. I had bills, a kid, and pride that couldn't pay rent. The company gave me nights because women handle calm passengers better. That's what they said. Calm passengers, as if the night itself is calm. On my bus, there's always a smell. Fabric seats warmed by bodies, cheap deodorant, instant noodles, sometimes wet umbrellas. At night, people sleep with their mouths open, headphones in, trusting you with their lives without ever knowing your name. That night, we departed late. A minor mechanical issue. A supervisor named Gomez kept hovering, irritated. "Don't stop anywhere extra," he said. "We've had incidents." Incidents is a word people use when they don't want to say robbery. I nodded. Understood. We loaded passengers. Most were normal. A couple, a young man with a backpack, an older woman clutching a purse like it contained her heart. A last passenger boarded right before departure. A thin man in a cap, face low. He paid cash. Didn't make eye contact. "Seat?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just walked down the aisle. I watched him in the mirror above the windshield. He stopped at the far back, then sat. Not in an empty seat near others, but in seat 17, the one near the middle, alone. Something about that bothered me. Seat 17 had been a problem for weeks. Every morning after my route, the cleaner would complain. "It's wet again," he'd say, "like someone spilled water." But no one ever admitted spilling anything, no bottle left behind, no stain pattern. Just wet fabric. We left Veracruz and headed into the dark. Rain started lightly, tapping the windshield like fingers. The wipers squeaked in a steady rhythm. The road reflected headlights, making everything look doubled. About an hour in, passengers slept. The bus hummed. The engine's warmth filled the cabin. Then the overhead speaker crackled. Our intercom. I frowned. It wasn't supposed to activate unless I pressed it. A faint sound came through, not words. Not a voice you can answer, just a soft, breathy whisper like wind caught in a vent. I tightened my grip on the wheel. The intercom stopped. I told myself it was rain and wiring. Then my dashboard flashed briefly, an alert for the rear door sensor, like the rear door had opened. Impossible. Rear door is locked during travel. I glanced at the mirror. In the aisle near seat 17, I saw movement. A shape standing. I slowed slightly, heart pounding, and looked again. The aisle was empty. My mouth went dry. I kept driving, telling myself to focus. Roads demand focus. Fear is a distraction. At the next checkpoint, a police vehicle sat on the shoulder. Real police, I hoped. They waved us through without stopping. I felt relief like a wave. Then, a few kilometers later, headlights appeared behind us. Close. Aggressive. A car tailgating, flashing high beams. I felt my stomach tighten. Not again. Not on a bus full of sleeping people. The car pulled alongside and I saw two men inside, faces shadowed. One motioned with his hand. "Pull over." My heart hammered. I thought of Gomez incidents. I didn't pull over. Company policy. Also survival. The car stayed beside us too long, matching speed. The man in the passenger seat lifted something. Maybe a phone, maybe something else. Hard to tell in rain and darkness. From the cabin, someone coughed. Sharp, startled. Then the intercom crackled again. This time, the whispering sound rose slightly like breath across a microphone. Seat 17's row light flickered. On, off, on, like a pulse. I glanced at the mirror. Seat 17 looked occupied, but not by the thin man in the cap. He was sleeping in a different seat now, I realized, closer to the front, head against the window as if he'd moved without me noticing. Seat 17 had someone else. A small shape, hunched slightly, head down. My mouth went dry. The shape didn't move like a passenger shifting, it sat too still. The car beside us suddenly jerked, swerved slightly away as if the driver flinched, then dropped back behind us. I watched his headlights recede, fading into rain. I breathed out shakily, but my eyes kept returning to seat 17 in the mirror. As we climbed a darker stretch near the mountains, the rain intensified. The bus rocked slightly in wind. Then I smelled something cold and damp, like wet earth and old river water, rising through the cabin. Passengers stirred, someone muttered in sleep. Seat 17's row light flickered again. I didn't stop, I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes forward, refusing the invitation of curiosity. When we arrived in Puebla at dawn, passengers disembarked slowly, sleepy and grateful. The thin man in the cap got off without looking at me. No goodbye, no complaint, like he hadn't been part of anything. When the bus was empty, the cleaner boarded inside. "Seat 17, he said immediately. "It's wet again." I walked down the aisle, my boots thudding softly on rubber floor. The fabric of seat 17 was soaked, cold to the touch, as if someone had just stood up from it after sitting for hours in rain. No bottle, no spill, nothing. On the window beside it, there was a faint fogged patch, like someone had leaned their forehead against it. And in that fog, a mark appeared as the morning warmed the glass. A small handprint, too small to belong to any adult passenger. My advice? If you take night buses, don't insist on sitting alone in the seat everyone avoids, even if it's empty and quiet. Some quiet is not peace. Some quiet is waiting. The mile where the radio learned my name. Hello, Senor Williams. Hello to everyone listening to Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Daniel Rios. I've been a long-haul truck driver for almost 15 years, mostly hauling refrigerated loads up and down Mexico. I'm writing because I heard another trucker on this channel talk about voices that don't belong to anyone, and it unlocked something I've been trying to bury since the night I crossed Federal Highway 57 with a load I should have refused. Turn off the light if you can, or don't. Either way, I hope I don't interrupt your sleep, but I need to say this out loud somewhere, because the road taught me a rule I never learned in any training. Sometimes the danger isn't what follows your trailer, it's what climbs into your cab when you think you're alone. That week I was running on fumes, emotionally and literally. My ex-wife had moved out with our daughter, and my phone was full of final notice messages from the bank. I had a stack of debt that felt like a second sleeper bunk behind me, always there, always heavy. When my dispatcher called offering a last-minute run from San Luis Potosi to the outskirts of Monterrey, I said yes before I even heard the details. High value, he warned. Don't stop unless you have to. High value meant two things on that route: insurance paperwork and people who might want the load more than you do. I left before midnight, the kind of hour where the city lights thin out and your headlights start swallowing the world. The cab smelled like stale coffee, vinyl, and that faint burnt oil scent that never truly leaves a working rig. My seat was cracked and sticky from years of heat, and the dash had a buzz to it, the little vibration that tells you you're riding an older truck that's trying its best. The first hour was normal, a ribbon of asphalt, a pale moon behind high cloud, and the steady engine rhythm that usually calms me down. I had the radio on low, not music, just talk. Truckers do that. We don't always need a song. Sometimes we need a voice so our thoughts don't get too loud. Around Matehuala, I got the first sign something was wrong. A burst of static sharp enough to make me wince cut through the speakers, then very clear my name. Daniel. Not a greeting, not a call sign, just my name, said like someone leaning close. I checked the mirror instinctively like I could see the sound. The sleeper was dark. My thermos sat in the cup holder. A hoodie hung from the passenger seat. Everything where it should be. The radio went back to normal chatter. I told myself it was coincidence. A caller, someone else named Daniel. There are a lot of Daniels. But then the dispatcher's warning crawled into my head. Don't stop unless you have to. And that's when the human part of the night arrived. A pickup with dark windows slid up behind me, then alongside. No company logos. No plates I could see. It matched my speed like it was reading my thoughts. My hands tightened on the wheel. My mouth went dry. I told myself, keep going, don't make it a scene. The pickup's passenger window lowered just a few inches, enough for a hand to appear. 2 fingers flicked downward, the universal signal, pull over. I shook my head without looking directly at them. I stared forward, at the narrow tunnel my headlights carved out of the dark. The pickup fell back. For a second I felt relief, and that's when the radio crackled again. Don't stop, Daniel. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't dramatic, it was calm, like a friend, like a warning from someone who'd already seen the outcome. My skin prickled. I turned the volume knob down until the speaker almost muted, but the voice came through anyway, as if the knob didn't matter. They're not cops, don't stop. The pickup surged forward and cut in front of me, close enough that I hit the brakes. My trailer shuddered, the straps in the back creaked, the engine dipped and caught again, complaining. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. The pickup brake checked me twice. Then it drifted toward the shoulder like it wanted to herd me off the road. I grabbed my phone with one hand and tried to call highway patrol, but the screen showed no service. In that moment, on that straight stretch, it might as well have been a toy. And then, the temperature in the cab dropped. Not gradually, not like the night air leaking in. It dropped like someone opened a freezer inside my chest. My breath fogged in front of my face. The steering wheel felt colder beneath my palms. The radio hissed. Left lane now. I didn't think, I didn't argue, I just obeyed. I signaled and moved left, heart punching against my ribs, tires humming louder on the smoother strip of road. The pickup stayed in front until a second vehicle appeared ahead of it, parked crooked on the shoulder, lights off. Something long and dark lay across the right lane for a split second. Spikes, a chain, I couldn't tell. If I'd stayed right, my front tire would have hit it. The trailer would have whipped. The truck would have gone over. The pickup swerved suddenly too late, and his right side caught whatever was in the lane. I heard a horrible scraping sound, metal against asphalt, followed by a bang that echoed through the empty night. The pickup's back end fishtailed. It slapped the shoulder and spun. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I kept my eyes locked on the road, like staring away from something could make it less real. My cab stayed cold. The radio stayed alive. Keep going. Don't slow down. My throat ached from holding my breath. Tears stung my eyes. Not fear tears exactly, but the kind that come when your body is trying to purge poison. I drove like that for another 40 minutes, not stopping, not blinking, following the thin white lines as if they were a rope leading me out of a pit. At a well-lit service station outside Saltillo, I finally pulled in. Bright fluorescents, a few cars, a security guard with a radio at his belt. Life. Normal life. I shut off the engine and sat in silence, palms still clamped on the wheel. The cab warmed slowly like it was returning from somewhere it had no right to go. I walked inside on shaky legs and bought a coffee I didn't want. The cashier looked at me like he could tell something had happened without me saying it. "You okay, Jefe?" he asked. I tried to laugh. It came out thin. Just tired. I paid and stepped back outside. My truck sat under the harsh lights, plain and heavy and real. I climbed into the cab, and for a second, I expected the cold again, the voice again. Nothing. But then I noticed something on the passenger seat. A small slip of paper, folded once. The kind of paper you tear from a receipt roll. I didn't remember leaving anything there. I opened it. It was blank, except for 2 words written in shaky pen like someone had written in the dark. Don't stop. My stomach turned. I checked my pockets, my logbook, the glove compartment. No pen like that. No torn receipt roll. Nothing. I stared at the note until my eyes burned. Then I did the stupidest thing a scared man can do. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe I'd written it earlier and forgotten. Maybe the cashier slipped it in by accident. Maybe my mind was trying to stitch meaning onto chaos. But then the radio clicked on by itself, no station, no chatter. Just breathing, soft, slow, close to the mic. And underneath it, a faint sound like tires on gravel. I yanked the power knob and the radio died completely. Not muted. Dead. That's when I realized the note wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that someone had been listening with me, and it knew my name the way a debt collector knows your address. I made it to Monterey, delivered the load, didn't tell my dispatcher what happened. I kept the note in my wallet for months like a talisman I hated but couldn't throw away. Even now I avoid stopping on long empty stretches of 57, especially near Matehuala. If my phone loses signal, I keep driving until I see lights and other people. And my advice is simple, not moral, just survival. If a stranger tries to pull you over in the dark on a lonely highway, don't stop. Even if they look official, even if they flash lights, even if your fear begs you to end the chase. Because on that road, I learned that the night can set traps with human hands. And sometimes the only warning you get comes from something that never shows its face. And now, another story from the roads where fear doesn't need an explanation, only a moment. The woman who sold blessings behind the night market. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to the whole Carreteras de la Oscuridad community. My name is Marisol Sanchez. I sell snacks and cigarettes from a small stand near a night market in Guadalajara, the kind that comes alive after midnight. Music, lights, people pretending they're not tired. I'm writing because I used to listen to these stories to stay awake during my shifts, and I always thought, At least I'm surrounded by people. Nothing can happen here. I was wrong. Apaguen la luz if you want, or keep it on. It won't change what I saw, but maybe it would keep you from imagining too much. I was closing my stand when it started. The last customers had drifted away, and the market's noise had thinned into scattered laughter and distant engines. The air smelled like fried dough, sweat and exhaust. My hands were sticky from soda syrup. My feet hurt from standing all night on uneven pavement. I had been working extra shifts because my mother was sick. Not a dramatic illness, worse than that. A slow one. Medications that cost more every month. Doctor visits that felt like paying a fee to hear bad news in a polite voice. And I had other problems too, ones you don't say out loud. An ex who didn't accept being an ex. A landlord who wanted rent early. A constant nervousness that made me jump when someone called my name. That night, as I counted cash under the little bulb of my stand, a woman appeared beside my table like she'd stepped out of the shadow itself. I didn't hear her approach. No footsteps, no rustle of clothes. Just there. She looked ordinary at first glance, older, maybe in her 50s, wrapped in a dark shawl. But the smell that followed her didn't belong in a market. It was sharp and clean salt and something like wet earth, the scent you get after rain when you dig too deep. "You work hard, Nina," she said. Her voice was normal, human, nothing supernatural. That's what made it worse, because it meant she could have been anyone. "Yeah," I said carefully, holding my money pouch close. "We all do." She smiled like she understood more than I wanted her to. "Your mother, she's tired." My stomach dropped. I hadn't mentioned my mother to anyone there. "Who are you?" I asked. Instead of answering, she reached into her shawl and pulled out a small bundle tied with red thread. It looked like herbs, dry leaves, maybe rosemary or something I couldn't recognize. "Protection," she said softly, "for the road between life and sleep." I don't believe in those things. I grew up hearing stories, sure, like everyone in Mexico does, but belief is a luxury when you're counting coins. Still, the way she said it made my skin tighten. "I'm fine," I told her. "I'm closing." She leaned closer. Her eyes were dark but not empty, just too steady. "You've been followed," she whispered. "Not by spirits, by a man who doesn't like the word no." My throat went dry. Images flashed in my mind. My ex's car idling across the street the way he used to watch without blinking. I tried to keep my face calm. "You're wrong." She smiled again. "I'm not. And tonight he's near." That's when I heard it. An engine that wasn't passing through, but circling. Slow. Patient. I glanced toward the street and saw a car parked under a dead streetlight, half hidden. I couldn't see the driver, but I felt the weight of attention like a hand on my neck. My chest tightened, my hands shook as I folded my table. The woman placed the herb bundle on my counter. "Take it, no payment, just don't throw it away." I stared at it. "Why would you help me?" She didn't answer directly. She just said, "Because you listen to stories and stories listen back." That sentence made my stomach twist. It sounded like nonsense, but it landed like truth. I shoved the bundle into my bag without thinking, more to get rid of her than to accept her offer. "Thanks," I said flatly. She nodded once, then walked away into the thinning market crowd. Except the crowd wasn't there anymore. Vendors had mostly packed up. The music was off. The street had gone quiet in the way it gets quiet when the city is still awake but pretending not to be. And I couldn't see her. It was like she'd dissolved into the air. I told myself my eyes were tired, my mind was anxious. People come and go. I zipped my bag, locked my stand, and started walking toward the bus stop a few blocks away. I kept to the brighter streets, the ones with open stores and security cameras. But the engine followed. Slow at first, then closer. The car rolled behind me at walking speed, like a predator that didn't need to run. I didn't look back right away. I didn't want to confirm it. But when I did, I saw the same car from earlier, lights off, creeping along. My heart hammered, my hands went cold. I dug my phone out, but the screen showed low battery. Of course it did. I tried to call a friend. It rang once, then died. The car stopped. A door opened. I heard a man's voice, low and familiar. "Marisol." My legs turned to water and I didn't answer. I kept walking faster. "Marisol," he said again, closer. "Don't act like you don't hear me." I turned into a side street without thinking, one that was darker and narrower. It was a mistake. I knew it the second I did it, but panic doesn't care about logic. The car followed, rolling in behind me. And then the air changed. It got heavy, not humid heavy, like the space itself thickened. The streetlights flickered. The sound of the city seemed to dull, like someone turned the volume down on reality. I stopped. I don't know why. My body just stopped, like an animal freezing. I looked ahead and saw something that didn't make sense. At the far end of the street, under a weak streetlight, there were tiny footprints in the dust near the curb. Bare footprints, child-sized, leading toward the light. But there was no child. The footprints moved, appearing one by one as if an invisible person was walking. My breath caught. The hair on my arms lifted. Behind me, the car door slammed. Footsteps approached. My ex's steps, heavy, impatient. "Don't run," he called. "We need to talk." The invisible footprints stopped. The streetlight above them blinked twice, then held steady. In the glow, I saw something else. A shape in the corner of my eye, crouched near a doorway. Small, hunched, wrapped in shadow. I couldn't see its face. I couldn't see its hands, but I felt it watching. A whisper slid through the air, so faint I thought it was my own breath at first. Not words, just the soft sound of someone shushing. My ex reached me. I smelled his cologne and anger. He grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to leave a mark, but hard enough to remind me he could. "You think you can ignore me?" he hissed. I tried to pull free. "Let go." He smiled without warmth. "Or what?" The streetlight flickered again, harder this time. The air dropped in temperature, and I saw my ex's smile falter as he glanced past me down the street. "What the?" he muttered. He let go of my wrist. For a second I thought he'd changed his mind. Then I realized he was staring at the footprints. The footprints began moving again toward us. My ex stepped back. I felt him hesitate, like some part of his brain recognized danger that wasn't human. "What is that?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The shape near the doorway shifted just slightly, and I heard that shushing sound again, closer, like it was in my ear. My ex took another step back toward the car. His confidence leaked out of him like air from a punctured tire. "This isn't funny," he said, but his voice shook. The footprints stopped right in front of him. And then his car alarm went off, loud, frantic, breaking the silence like glass. He flinched, slapped his key fob, cursed. The alarm kept screaming. He looked at me again, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of getting caught, fear of something that didn't care about laws. He got into his car fast and slammed the door. The engine roared to life, tires squealed, and he reversed hard out of the street like he was escaping a fire. The alarm stopped the moment his car cleared the corner. The air lightened. The city sound returned. My breathing came back in shallow gulps. I stood there trembling, feeling my wrist throb where he'd grabbed me. On the ground where the footprints had been, there was something small and pale, a grainy sprinkle like crushed salt. I stumbled home. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed with my bag in my lap and pulled out the herb bundle the woman had given me. The red thread around it had loosened. Inside, mixed with the dry leaves, were a few coarse crystals of salt. And underneath them, a folded strip of paper. 2 words written in neat handwriting. Not yet. Not safe, not protected, not free, just not yet. I still work the market, but I don't take the dark side streets anymore. I don't walk alone when I can avoid it. And once a week, when the night feels too quiet, I leave a pinch of salt at my doorway, like a boundary I can't explain. My advice is simple. If someone offers you a blessing and doesn't ask for money, don't laugh. Sometimes people see what's coming. Sometimes they've already survived it. And if you ever feel followed in a way that makes your skin go tight, trust that feeling. Human danger is real, and on certain nights something else might be watching the same threat, quietly. And now, Senor Williams, another testimony from someone who works while the city sleeps. The trash route that never reached the end. Hello, Senor Williams, and greetings to everyone in Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Ivan Garcia. I'm a night sanitation worker in Monterrey. Most people don't think about trash until it smells, but my crew and I move through neighborhoods while families sleep, lifting bags, hearing dogs bark, watching curtains twitch. I'm writing because I heard a story on your channel about a man who felt watched on an empty road, and I realized I've been living with that feeling since the night our truck stopped on a street that doesn't exist on any map. If you're listening in bed, pull the blanket a little closer. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make sense of what still follows me when I hear the hiss of hydraulics. My shift started like always: meet at the depot after midnight, drink bitter coffee from a dented thermos, check the route sheet, joke about who smelled worse, the trash or us. The air in the garage was thick with diesel fumes and old food rot. My gloves were damp from the last shift, stiff with dried grime. I was distracted that night. My younger brother had gotten into trouble again, and my mother kept calling me, crying, asking me to help. I didn't have money to help. I barely had enough to keep my own life from sliding apart. That's a kind of stress that makes everything look sharper, like the world's edges are cutting you. Our driver, Chewy, slapped the route sheet against the dashboard. Same neighborhoods, same bags, he said. In and out, no drama. No drama is a fantasy in this job. We rolled out around 1. The truck groaned and rattled. The back compactor made that rhythmic metal clank that you stop hearing after a while until you don't, and then you realize you've been listening to it in your sleep. First neighborhoods were fine. Bags out, bins full, stray cats darting away. We worked fast. The city at that hour feels like a different place. Quiet, emptied out, like the day people got erased and left their garbage behind. Around 3, we reached a street I didn't recognize, and it wasn't on the road sheet. Chewy frowned, slowed down, tapped the paper with a dirty finger. "This isn't right," he muttered. Our third guy, Memo, leaned forward. "Maybe we missed a turn." Chewy shook his head. "No, I know these blocks." The streetlight ahead flickered weakly. The houses were too dark. Not sleeping dark, abandoned dark. No porch lights, no TVS, no dogs. The air smelled wrong. Not trash, not diesel. Chlorine. The clean, sharp smell you associate with hospitals and pools, out of place on a residential street. Memo made a joke to break the tension. Maybe rich people wash their trash. None of us laughed. We kept going, slow, scanning for street signs. I stared at the names on the corners, expecting familiar neighborhoods. The first sign was blank. Not scratched out, not faded. Blank like it had never been painted. Chewy's hands tightened on the wheel. What the hell? Then the truck's radio clicked on. Not music, not chatter. A child's voice, thin, distant, singing a little melody that made my stomach drop because I recognized it. It was the lullaby my mother used to hum when we were kids. Memo sat up straight. "Did you?" "No," I said, too fast. Chewy reached for the volume knob, but before he could touch it, the singing stopped. Silence. And then we heard it from outside, not the radio. A soft dragging sound like bare feet on pavement. I turned my head toward the side window and saw something that made my breath lock in my chest. A small figure stood under a streetlight behind us, child-sized, still facing the truck. I couldn't see the face, only the outline. Chewy whispered, "You seeing that?" I nodded, throat too tight to speak. Memo swore softly. "It's probably a kid, we should..." The figure lifted one arm slowly like it was pointing. Not at us. At the back of the truck. The compactor hissed even though we hadn't engaged it. The hydraulics whined, metal shifted. I turned toward the back window. The small dirty pane that looked into the hopper area, it was mostly darkness, but in that darkness something moved like a shadow folding itself. I felt my skin crawl. My mind tried to assign meaning. Maybe a bag fell, maybe a rat, maybe a stray dog climbed in. But the movement wasn't animal, it was too deliberate. Chewy swallowed. "We're leaving." He pressed the gas. The truck moved forward and the child figure didn't run after us. It stayed under the streetlight, watching. As we rolled away, I saw something else beside it. Another small outline and another, like more children stepping out of the dark. No faces, no voices, just silhouettes. The chlorine smell intensified until my eyes watered. "Where are we?" Memo asked, voice high. Chewy didn't answer. His knuckles were white on the wheel. The street ahead stretched longer than it should have. A straight road in a city full of turns. We passed the same crooked mailbox twice. We passed the mural of a saint twice. The same crack in the sidewalk. The same abandoned bicycle leaning against a wall. I told myself we were looping, but Chewy wasn't turning. "We're not moving," I whispered, watching the streetlights pass, then pass again. Memo's breathing got loud. "Stop the truck." Stop! Something's wrong. Chewy slammed the brakes. The truck shuddered to a stop. The engine idled, heavy and alive. Silence. Then a knock on the side of the truck. 3 slow taps. Memo jolted. No. Another knock, this time on the back. Chewy stared straight ahead like looking away would keep it from being real. No one's there, he murmured like a prayer. The knock happened again, closer, like something was moving along the truck's side. Then the driver's door handle moved. Chewy flinched and grabbed the lock, snapping it down. The handle rattled gently, like someone trying politely. Memo whispered, "Don't open it." I couldn't move. My body felt numb, like fear had turned my blood to cold water. The radio clicked on again, static, then the child singing, softer now, like it was inside the cab. Under the singing, another sound began, chain sliding, metal dragging. The compactor hissed again. And then from the back window I saw a shape press against the glass from inside the hopper. Not a bag, not trash. A handprint. Small, wet-looking, though there was no rain. It slid downward slowly, leaving a faint smear like condensation. Memo started to sob under his breath. Chewy did something I've never seen him do before or since. He crossed himself fast and whispered, "We didn't do it, we didn't do it." I didn't know what he meant. Then the street lights outside blinked once, twice, and when they came back, the street was normal. We were on a familiar avenue. I recognized the convenience store. I recognized the graffiti. I recognized the sound of distant traffic. The chlorine smell vanished. The radio went back to a normal station like nothing had happened. Chewy didn't stop. He drove us straight back to the depot, ignoring the route sheet, ignoring the work, ignoring everything. At the depot, we climbed out on shaky legs. The night air smelled like diesel again, comforting in a sick way. Chewy opened the back hopper cautiously, like he expected something to jump out. It was full of trash, like always. But near the edge, tucked between bags, was something that didn't belong. A small plastic bracelet, cheap, the kind kids get at clinics, the kind with a name printed on it. The name was smudged, but I could read it. Ivan. My legs went weak. I stared at it until my vision tunneled. Chewy dropped it like it burned him. Memo backed away, shaking his head. No, 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 no. None of us reported it. Who would we tell? Our supervisor would laugh. The police would ask if we were drunk, and we weren't. We were just tired men who had seen something that didn't fit into the world. After that night, I asked to change routes. I told them I had family issues. I told them anything. I didn't want to go near that street again. But sometimes when I'm on shift and the truck stops at a quiet corner, I smell chlorine for a second, just a hint, and I hear a soft humming under the engine, like a lullaby that knows my name. My advice, if you work at night and you find yourself on a street you don't recognize, don't keep going just because you're supposed to finish the job. Turn around, find light, find other people. Because some places aren't lost. They're waiting. And now, one more story from the kind of night where mistakes follow you into rooms with locked doors. The motel room with no mirror. Hello, Senor Williams. Good evening to the whole audience of Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Angel Herrera. I'm not proud of the reason I'm writing. I'm a married man, and I was on the road for work. Construction contracts, short deadlines, cheap motels. I made choices that felt small in the moment and huge afterward. I'm telling this because I heard someone on your channel mention that the road punishes secrets in strange ways. I didn't believe that until I stayed in a motel off the highway near Culiacan, Sinaloa. A place that looked normal from the outside and felt wrong the second the door shut behind me. If you're listening in bed, I'm sorry. I know some of you come here to relax, but I also know the people who listen to these stories understand that fear doesn't always come from monsters. Sometimes it comes from guilt, and from the way the world reacts to it. I was driving late, exhausted, with my phone full of missed calls I didn't want to answer. My wife had been suspicious for months. I had been lying for longer. Every lie feels like a bump you tell yourself you'll fix later until you realize your whole life is driving on a damaged tire. That night I wasn't thinking about ghosts or criminals. I was thinking about getting to a room, taking a shower, and pretending I was still the man my family believed I was. The motel was one of those roadside places with a flickering neon sign and a parking lot full of oil stains. The clerk behind the glass barely looked at me. The air smelled like bleach and cigarettes trying to hide something older. "Cash," he said. I paid. He slid the key under the window without touching my hand. "Room 9, he muttered. Outside a dog barked once, then went silent. Room 9's door stuck when I pushed it open like it didn't want to move. Inside, the place was dim and stale. The sheets looked clean but felt rough. The AC rattled. The room smelled like chlorine and damp wood. I turned on the bathroom light, expecting that harsh mirror glow. There was no mirror. Not shattered, not covered, just missing. A blank space above the sink where the screws were still there, as if someone had removed it carefully. I stared at that empty wall longer than I should have. I told myself it was cheap maintenance, theft, anything. I took a shower, the water ran lukewarm, the curtain stuck to my skin. I scrubbed hard like I could wash off my own decisions. When I came out, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Don't sleep." My stomach tightened. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I told myself it was a scam, a wrong number, the kind of thing people send to scare strangers. Then my phone buzzed again. "You're not alone in there." I laughed. One sharp sound that didn't feel like mine. I locked the door and double-checked the latch. I pulled the curtain aside to check the window. It faced the parking lot. A few cars, no one staring. I tried calling the front desk. The line rang and rang, then clicked into dead silence. No dial tone, nothing. The AC rattled louder, then suddenly stopped. The room went too quiet. In that silence, I heard a soft sound from the bathroom, like a fingertip tapping ceramic. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. The taps weren't random. They were steady, patient. I stared at the bathroom doorway. The light was still on. The empty mirror spot was just visible from where I stood. Tap, tap. I swallowed. "Hello?" I called out, feeling ridiculous. No answer. I walked toward the bathroom slowly, like the floor might break under me. My skin tightened with that cold anticipation you get right before something bad happens. The tapping stopped the moment I reached the sink. I leaned in, staring at the blank wall where the mirror should be, as if a mirror could have shown me a threat. That's when I noticed something on the wall, faint at first like condensation. A smear, then another. As if a hand had pressed there from the other side. My breath caught, I stepped back. The air grew cold, suddenly sharply, and the smell of chlorine deepened until it stung my nose. Behind me, the TV turned on by itself. Static. A harsh, snowy screen with a faint hiss. Then the static cleared for half a second and I saw a shape on the screen, tall, thin, standing in a hallway that looked like mine. The shape didn't move like a person. It shifted, like shadow trying to stand upright. I lunged for the remote and hit power. The TV stayed on. Static again. My phone buzzed. "Look at the door." I didn't want to. My whole body screamed not to. But I looked. The motel door, locked, had a shadow at the bottom, on the thin strip of light under it. The shadow wasn't shaped like feet. It was too wide, too fluid, like smoke pooling. And then, the doorknob turned. Slowly. Gently. Like someone testing it. I backed away until I hit the bed. My heart hammered so hard I felt dizzy. The doorknob turned again. The latch held. And then I heard something else. A second sound, not at the door. A scraping above me. I looked up. The ceiling vent cover, old metal, was slightly shifted like it had been moved recently. A soft, dry sound came from inside the vent like someone breathing through dust. I whispered, "No." The vent cover trembled slightly, then settled. My phone buzzed again and the message wasn't words this time. It was an audio clip, 5 seconds long. My own voice recorded. Whispering, "I'm sorry." I hadn't said that in the room. Not out loud. I felt something in me crack, panic mixed with guilt, like the motel was squeezing my secrets out of me and turning them into threats. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, my phone. I didn't even put shoes on. I yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, but the air was colder out there than it should have been and the lights above the doors flickered. As I stepped out, I saw something at the far end of the hallway, near the stairs. A figure crouched low, too low, like it didn't have bones the way we do. It didn't speak. It didn't rush me. It just watched. And I felt it deep in my chest that it wasn't there for money. It wasn't there for my body. It was there for the part of me I'd been trying to hide from myself. I ran, barefoot across the parking lot, gravel cutting my soles. I didn't care. I got in my truck, slammed the door, locked it, started the engine with shaking hands. As my headlights swept across the motel, I saw room 9's window, curtain open now. And in the glass, reflecting my headlights, there was something that should have been impossible. A mirror-like shine. As if the room had suddenly grown a mirror again, just long enough to show me a silhouette standing behind the curtain, taller than any man I know. I drove until sunrise. I didn't stop. I didn't sleep. I didn't look in my rearview mirror for longer than a second at a time. When I finally pulled over at a busy gas station hours away, I washed my face in the bathroom and stared at myself in a real mirror under bright lights. I looked like a man who'd aged years in one night. My phone buzzed one last time from that unknown number. Go home. No threats, no explanations. Just an order that felt like mercy and punishment at the same time. I went home. I told my wife the truth. Not because I became brave, but because after that night, lying felt like standing in front of a door that keeps turning its own knob. My advice: don't rent the cheapest room just because you think you deserve it. And don't carry secrets into lonely places and assume they won't follow you. Some rooms don't need mirrors to show you what you are. Sometimes they remove the mirror because the reflection is already waiting.